That Mother's Day, sunlight poured over the garden I once planted with my calloused hands, now just a stage for someone else to perform fake devotion. My son knelt before his mother-in-law, slipped a $30,000 diamond ring on her finger, and brushed a kiss across her knuckles like a dutiful knight. "For the woman who gave me the perfect wife," he said. Laughter rippled around the table, glasses clinked, and the diamond sparkle flashed like a taunt. "And me, the woman who once sold her wedding ring to pay for my son's schooling, received from my daughter-in-law a cheap plastic mug, the best mom ever decal half peeled off." She smirked. "I hope you still have enough teeth to drink tea." The laughter was thin as a blade, and everyone fell quiet, waiting for my reaction. I smiled. I smiled to hide the moment my heart cracked, when I understood that in this house, a mother's love had been priced at spare change. I set the mug down, opened my phone under the table, and quietly canceled every recurring transfer. They had given me humiliation. I would give them a lesson no one would forget. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Rebecca Hart, 70 years old, founder and former CEO of Heart & Loom Apparel, a small fashion company I built with these hands. 40 years ago, I started with an old sewing machine in my husband's garage, stitching dresses for neighbors to cover the electric bill. Now my only son lives in a 4,000-square-foot house I bought for him. The day I handed him the keys, I said, "This is a reward for all your effort." Maybe that was the day I laid the foundation for today's disrespect. The party was held in that very house, my house, though everyone now calls it Lucas and Linda's place. They hired a landscaper, covered the tables with white orchids, and brought in a chef to serve upscale European dishes. I sat at the far end, near the wooden fence where I used to grow lavender, now replaced by Linda with stone statues and fancy patio chairs. Lucas, in a navy suit, took Delilah's, his mother-in-law's, hand and ceremoniously fastened the glittering diamond ring on her finger. The table gasped in unison. Someone said, "Amazing, Lucas. You're the best son-in-law in the world." I looked around. No one noticed me at the end of the table, holding a cup of cold tea. When Linda turned to me, her smile had an icy edge. "Mother Rebecca," she said, syrupy sweet, "I know you like practical things, so I found something perfect for you." She set a pink plastic mug in front of me, price tag still on. "Best mom ever" printed on the side. The table burst into polite, shallow laughter, as if everyone had joined a play I wasn't told about. I picked up the mug, felt the flimsy plastic between my fingers. Linda tilted her head and glanced at me. "Hope you still have enough teeth to drink tea." Her voice was light as a breeze, but loud enough for me to hear, and certainly on purpose. Lucas cleared his throat, pretending not to notice. I smiled, just as they expected, so as not to ruin the party. But something snapped inside my head. Maybe that was the moment I realized everything I'd sacrificed over 70 years, the sleepless nights stitching seam by seam, the times I sold assets to cover my son's debts, the youth I poured into lifting him up, had all been reduced to a pink plastic mug. After the party, Linda saw guests to the door. She said softly to me, still wearing that cool smile, "You should rest, Mother. Don't worry about the company so much. You've done enough. It's time for us to take over." I just nodded. "Yes, I'll rest." She didn't know that as I said it, I opened my phone, scrolled to my banking app, and canceled every recurring transfer I'd set up for Lucas' tuition, insurance, living expenses. One tap, and I took back control of my life. As I left, I heard Delilah praise him. "Lucas, you really are a wonderful man. You know how to move a woman." I walked away in silence, gripping the plastic mug. The sunset lit the lush lawn, the same lawn I used to water every evening. Now everything felt foreign, even the child I gave birth to. That night, I went back to my small apartment in Santa Rosa. It isn't fancy, but it's a place where I can breathe without the suffocation of ingratitude. I set the mug on the table beside a photo of Lucas at 8 wearing a shirt I sewed, grinning wide with 2 missing front teeth. I brushed the picture gently. "You loved me for real back then, didn't you?" I whispered. For a few minutes, tears fell faster than I could wipe them away. Then I told myself, "No, Rebecca. Crying won't buy back respect." I stood, opened the little safe, and took out the company's financial files. Page after page, every expense, every transfer I'd made for Lucas glared back at me like scars. I marked the big ones: $25,000 for a failed restaurant, $18,000 for a luxury car, $7,000 for a Cancun vacation, total over $1 million in 5 years. I didn't feel angry anymore, just empty. But in that emptiness, a thought flashed. It's time to audit everything, not just money, but family. Right as I turned off the light, my phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Mom, I hope you're not upset. Delilah is like a second mother to me. I just wanted to make her happy." I stared at the screen. Second mother. The phrase chilled me. I thought of the years I broke my back, mother, father, housekeeper, bill payer, all in one. No one was his second mother. There was only me, the one who spent her youth making him the man he is today. I didn't reply. I set the phone down, picked up the plastic mug, and turned it in my hands. The sticky label still read, "Made in China." I laughed. How ironic, after a lifetime in apparel, proud of making quality handcrafted goods, the only gift my son gave me was something cheap, with no real sentiment. The next morning, I wrote a list. 9 A.M. Meet the bank. Cancel all Lucas's authorized cards. 10:30 A.M. Meet my longtime attorney, Marion Blake, to revisit the will and company shares. 1 p.m. Call Aaron Patel, CFO, to review the last 5 years of statements. 3 p.m. Review the lease and title for the house Lucas is living in. I wanted to know exactly every dollar I'd given and which dollars had been abused. I made coffee and looked out the window. The California sky was crystal clear, light pouring through white frames. A strange calm settled over me. Not because I'd forgiven, but because I finally knew I would do the right thing. That afternoon, the bank called to confirm all transfers had been canceled. In that moment, it felt like I'd removed a rope that had been cinched around my neck for years. I was no longer the mother of CEO Lucas Hart. I was just Rebecca Hart, a woman who spent a lifetime giving and who, for the first time, was learning to keep a little for herself. I set the plastic mug beside the old photo. "Tomorrow," I murmured, "everything changes." And for the first time in years, I smiled, not to hide the pain, but to welcome the storm on its way. The next morning, as the first light slipped through the white curtains, I sat at my desk with the battered notebook where I'd recorded Hart and Loom's earliest expenses. Every number, every shaky blue ink entry was a piece of me. I looked at my hands, still bearing calluses from those years of needles. These hands once sewed an entire life. They shook now, not from age, but from facing the price of blind love, children raised by sacrifice who never learned gratitude. I remembered it all. When Lucas was 5, I worked 2 shifts at a textile mill in Fresno, day shifts on the floor, nights studying accounting by mail so I could manage my own books. Some nights I fell asleep at the table, fingers stained with ink and blood where the needle pierced my skin, still doing math in my head, counting every cent saved for the dream. I opened my first shop in my husband's old garage with 3 used industrial machines from a shuttered factory. 6 months later, I had 6 workers. A year later, 12. I remember crying at the table when I signed my first contract with a small retail chain in Oregon, not for the money, but because someone finally believed in what my hands could make. The company grew. 30 workers, then 50, then 200. Heart and loom started to mean something in American handcraft. I picked every fabric myself, checked every seam. Each piece carried my dream big enough to cover Lucas's future. Then, as he grew up, the stitches in our relationship began popping, one by one. The first time Lucas failed, he launched an import sportswear business. I wired $50,000 to help my son get back up. 6 months later, it collapsed. The second time, he invested in an Italian restaurant with friends, and I drew another $30,000 from my retirement. The place closed before its first anniversary. The third time, I can't even remember which year, maybe when Linda was first pregnant. Lucas called, urgent. "Mom, this is a golden opportunity. A tech startup." I knew he didn't understand tech, but I still sent $100,000. 6 months later, the company vanished, leaving a sorry email and a zero balance. Each time he said, "I'll pay you back with interest." And each time I believed because I wanted to. Now I sat in front of my safe and pulled out thick envelopes of invoices and receipts. The German car Lucas bought to impress clients. The Cancun vacation where he and Linda posted sunny beach photos while I was in the hospital for heart tests. The restaurant investment he called a passion for cuisine, all with my signature. I stared at those cold numbers, then at my scarred hands. The sparkle of that $30,000 ring on Delilah's hand felt like a slap to these blood-worn fingers. On one side, diamond shine. On the other, time-worn scars, two worlds that don't touch. I closed the file. Something inside me cracked and lit up at the same time. I no longer felt sorry for myself. I saw a truth. I had raised my son into a rescue addict. I dialed Marion Blake, the attorney who'd handled Hart and Loom's first contracts 30 years ago. "Rebecca?" Marion's voice was steady as ever. "Marion, I need to see you, urgently. I want to change my will and the company structure." He paused, then said, "I'm guessing this is big." "Not bigger than the truth that I turned my son into someone dependent," I said, strangely calm. "I need to rewrite everything, not to punish him, but to teach him the final lesson." We set the meeting for the next morning. Next, I called Aaron Patel, the company's CFO. Aaron's worked with me over a decade, meticulous and loyal. When I told him to shut down all of Lucas's cards and block any personal spending from company accounts, he was quiet for a moment, then asked softly, "Are you sure, Mrs. Hart?" "I've never been more sure," I said. "Hart and Loom is my company, not a family credit union. I understand." "But Lucas will learn to live without a credit card his mother pays for." After I hung up, I leaned back and felt a strange lightness. For 40 years, I've been used to carrying everything: the company, the employees, even other people's failures. For the first time, I put something down and the sky didn't fall. That afternoon, I reopened Hart and Loom's balance sheet, lines of numbers: profit, expense, investment. I remembered those nights curled up in the garage, breathing oil and lint, counting every dollar saved. The old lines: expense, thread, revenue, retail chain contract, were the marks of my life. I set today's balance sheet beside it, bloated with Lucas's reckless withdrawals: cars, parties, hollow investments, corporate cards. The gap wasn't just money, it was values. I had become the bank for my own child without noticing. Night fell. I brewed chamomile tea and watched the streetlights flicker on along the boulevard. At 70, I thought I'd learned every lesson life had to offer. Turns out there was one more. Some children don't need more money, they need less of it to grow up. I opened the little notebook where my mother once wrote in black ink, "Never rob someone, especially the child you love, of the chance to stand up on their own." I traced the line like touching my mother's hand. And for the first time, I understood it completely. Near midnight, I opened my laptop and typed the first lines of the new legacy document. The title read, "From Leaving Behind to Teaching." I wrote. I, Rebecca Hart, decide to redirect the majority of my assets to a fund supporting education and self-reliance training for youth. Because I believe wealth isn't meant to feed dependency, but to kindle the ability to stand on one's own. I paused and looked outside. The California night glittered with tiny stars like tinsel, reminding me of the silver thread I used to edge a client's first wedding dress. Those threads stitched my life together, and now, with these same hands, I would stitch up what was missing in my heart. When I signed the draft, a weight lifted. No more anger, no more heaviness. Just a mother who finally understood that loving a child doesn't mean bailing him out forever. I folded the paper and slid it into an envelope. Outside, the city hummed, streetlights casting a warm glow on an empty road. I sipped my tea, chamomile soft in the air. Tomorrow, Marion would help me finalize it. Tomorrow, I would teach my son the last lesson in the only language he understands: action. 3 days later, I received a thank you card from Delilah Cole Lucas's mother-in-law. The paper smelled of lavender, the handwriting looped like ribbons. Thank you for raising such a wonderful son, Rebecca. Lucas truly is the gift any mother would dream of. At the bottom she signed in pale gold ink, then added a line. Your home is lovely. It must be quite costly to keep up. I laughed softly. Delilah always knew how to lace sugar into a jab, like a deft chef hiding bitterness under frosting. She arrives polished, expensive perfume and a gentle smile, but every sentence hides a cold little blade. When we first met, she praised me for keeping in shape at your age, then glanced at Linda and added, I hope you keep up too, once the skin starts to sag. I didn't react. People like Delilah live by sowing doubt, and Linda, my daughter-in-law, waters those seeds every day. I used to think Linda was just controlling, but she'd built an entire narrative. To outsiders, I was the mother who won't let go, meddling in her son's marriage. Linda told them I want to control everything, won't retire, and pressure Lucas financially. She told Delilah that I called Lucas 3 times a day just to check in, when in truth there was only one text a week. How are you doing? Linda told her friends I didn't accept the new daughter-in-law, even though I'm the one who gifted them their wedding house. I watched her performance, the gentle smile, the sympathetic eyes, the lines like, I'm only worried about Mom, all of it painted a perfectly phony portrait of virtue. And the most eager audience member of that play was Lucas, my son. Lucas has always liked being praised. The boy who once beamed when he was complimented on a shirt I sewed has become a man who survives on his wife's applause. When I offered feedback on financial management, Lucas frowned. I don't need a lecture every time we meet, Mom. But when Delilah said, Lucas has a head for business, just like his father, he grinned with proud, childlike delight. For Lucas, compliments are emotional currency more valuable than truth, and Linda knows that better than anyone. One night, I sat at the dining table and opened my phone to reread Linda's messages. They used to look harmless, but seeing them again, I realized how skillfully I'd been manipulated. Mom, Rebecca, I found a safe car for the baby. What do you think? Mom, Rebecca, this imported crib has medical certification. It's worth the money. Mom, Rebecca, the doctor says prenatal vitamins are very expensive, but great for the baby. And every message ended with a bank account number. Not once did she ask, How are you, Mom? Do you need anything? Or even a simple, thank you. I started printing every message, invoice, and receipt. Each time Linda texted urgent, I marked it in red. After 3 days, the stack was about 1 inch thick. I labeled each group: car, $68,000, vacation, $20,000, baby items, $15,000, jewelry and accessories, $12,000, a total of nearly $125,000 in just the past year. I titled the file Lucas and Linda, The Status Illusion, because none of those expenses were for survival. They were to maintain an image, the image of a young, successful couple living in a beautiful house, driving a luxury car, with a wealthy, generous mother-in-law. The more I looked, the more I saw they'd legitimize dependency by using my image. In their eyes, I wasn't a person. I was moral capital, a successful, wealthy woman with an obligation to give. Linda once joked at a party, "Mom, Rebecca is wonderful. She always knows how to make everyone feel taken care of." It sounded like praise, but the quick, sideways glance, half mocking, said everything. I understood. They felt no guilt taking money, because, in their minds, I was born to give it away. Instead of getting angry, I chose silence. People say silence is weakness, but I know it can also be preparation. That week, I contacted a private security company. They installed a legal camera system in my home with motion sensors and automatic cloud storage. I had them place a clear sign at the door. "This area is under video surveillance for protection of personal property." No one could sue me for that. I didn't need to spy. I just needed the bare truth records of how they treated me when the social performance was over. In just 2 weeks, what I expected started showing up. Linda stopped by without a single greeting and opened with, "Mom, my car needs maintenance. It's more than we thought." I deliberately answered, "Oh, you still have the company card." She hesitated, then said with a sour edge, "Lucas said you canceled it." "That's right, because that card is mine." Linda looked at me, the smile still on her face, but her eyes darker. "So you're going to let your son lose credibility with clients?" "A real man doesn't need an authorized card to have credibility," I said. Her face twisted for a beat before she regained her composure. I knew the camera was rolling. I began gathering evidence. Not to sue, but to prepare for what I was about to do. Emails those lines asking for temporary help. Receipts transfers from the company account to Lucas's personal account. Call logs, short calls, only to ask for money or to have me fix a crisis. I saved everything into a folder named the Plastic Cup Plan. The plastic cup they thought was a joke would become the legal trigger for my entire plan. I started a journal. Not to complain, but to preserve every detail: time, words, feelings. Partly because I needed documentation, partly because I feared forgetting the line between love and self-erasure. On the first page, I wrote, "Love has boundaries," and "that boundary is called respect. If they cross it, they've chosen to lose me." That night, I reread every page, every line, then looked out the window. The city still glowed, but I felt cold. Not from the wind, but from realizing I had lived too long in the shade of fake thank yous. The next day, I received an email from Marion Blake confirming meetings with the attorney and accountant. I replied simply, "I'm ready." Before shutting down, I opened the camera feed and re-watched a clip from yesterday. Linda stood in my living room, sunlight catching the stone on her hand, not a diamond, just glass, but she turned it like a treasure. She said, half scolding, half contemptuous, "Maybe she thinks she's old, so what's the point of keeping money?" I paused the video there. No pain, no anger, just a small smile. Because for the first time, I had the truth in hand, and that truth would be stronger than any excuse. Night fell, and I held the pink plastic cup, now my symbol of carelessness and awakening. The desk lamp shimmered on the thin plastic like a reminder, real value isn't surface deep. I set the cup beside the status illusion file and told myself, they used my money to build a faux castle. I'll use this truth to bring it down with law, with reason, and with the self-respect they can't buy. Then I sipped my tea, opened my laptop and typed the first line of the formal plan. The Plastic Cup Plan, Phase 1, begin with silence. And I knew from that moment on, my fight would no longer be about money, but about reclaiming a mother's worth. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The California sky was still dewy, pale light filtering through the sheer curtain like a thin layer of memory over the room. I brewed black coffee, what I call the morning ritual of someone who doesn't need anyone to make it for her. Today was important, the one-woman shareholders meeting where every decision of my life would pass with a single vote, mine. I put on a gray suit I hadn't worn in ages and the old heels I wore when I signed Hart and Loom's first contract. I smiled at the mirror. Everything began with one woman alone, and today it would be reborn by one woman alone. 8 a.m. I walked into the main bank branch, the place long known as the family's financial headquarters. The young teller stood to greet me. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart. You have an appointment with the branch manager, right?" I nodded. "Yes, and I need to change a few things. Permanently." In the private office, Manager Martinez, who's known me nearly 10 years, offered me a seat. "Is there a problem with your accounts, Mrs. Hart?" "No problem. I just want to reorganize my personal financial system." I slid a printed list across the desk. 1. Cancel all recurring transfers to Lucas's account. 2. Lock all authorized cards and related online banking access. 3. Set up new two-factor authentication only I can authorize with fingerprint. 4. Open a separate account named Mother's Left Behind Fund, temporary. Martinez looked up, surprised. "Are you sure? This is the family account you and your son have used for years." "I know." I cut in gently. "But my family now has only one person who needs protecting me." It took nearly an hour to finish. When I signed the last form, it felt like I'd taken off an old, heavy suit of armor I'd worn for decades. Martinez gave a small smile. "I don't know what's going on, but I think you're doing the right thing." "I think so too," I said evenly. 10 a.m. My meeting with my attorney, Marion Blake, took place on the 15th floor, an old building overlooking Santa Rosa's Central Park. Marion was the same. White hair, plum tie, a warm, steady voice that never wasted words. I set the documents on his desk. "Marion, I need to redo my will and adjust the company's share structure." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm guessing this is about Lucas?" "Not just about him. It revolves around him." I spoke slowly, clearly. "I want behavioral conditions added for beneficiaries. If Lucas wants to receive any part of my estate, he must meet 3 requirements. 1. No tax debt or bad credit history. 2. Proof of stable employment for at least 12 consecutive months. 3. At least 100 hours of annual volunteer work." Marion sat silent for a few seconds, then chuckled softly. "You've turned your will into a character development program. Better than feeding dependency," I said. "If the law allows, write it plainly. No compliance, no inheritance." He nodded, jotting notes. "And the primary assets? I want to create a Mother's Left Behind fund. The fund will receive 70 to 80% of total assets, including real estate, company shares, and investment returns. Goal: support older women abandoned by family or financially exploited." Marion looked up, eyes warm with respect. "That fund sounds very you." I smiled lightly. "It's the softest part of me and the last thing I want to leave behind." 11:30. I went to the company. CFO Aaron Patel was waiting in a small conference room. I handed him the new list. "This is the loyalty award plan for key employees. Anyone with more than 10 years gets a small equity grant, not cash." Aaron nodded, taking careful notes. I added, "As for Lucas, as of today, I'm revoking the financial power of attorney he held. I'll take care of it immediately." "What about invoice approvals?" "Mine, exclusively. We reviewed the insurance policies where Lucas appeared as a beneficiary. I ordered immediate changes. New beneficiaries: Mother's Left Behind Fund, 60%. Key company employees, 30%. Local charities, 10%. I signed. Marion watched a moment, then said quietly, "Rebecca, you're rewriting your legacy literally." I smiled. "Not rewriting, Marion. I'm just giving it back to the people who deserve to write it with me." 1:30 p.m. Back at the main office, I asked Aaron to bring the file on Lucas's house. In truth, the deed is still in my name. I bought it with my personal funds, but out of trust, I let them live there rent-free from day one. Now I wanted to change that not for money, but for fairness. I drafted a new lease, a symbolic amount, just enough to remind them that what they enjoyed didn't appear out of thin air. Marion nodded, a reasonable step. Not to take back, but to remind. "Exactly," I said. "They need to know the value of the roof over their heads." As the afternoon light tilted through the window, my desk held neat stacks. New will, lease, insurance changes, employee awards, charity fund. I gathered everything into a blue binder. On the cover, I wrote by hand, "The Plastic Cup." The name sounds simple, but to me it holds the whole awakening. That pink plastic cup, the cheapest gift I've ever received, became the symbol of a role reversal, from the insulted to the one in charge. 3 p.m. I called Lucas. "Can you come by my office at 4 this afternoon? I want to discuss the baby's budget." His voice lit up immediately. "Of course, Mom. Linda and I were just about to call you about that." "Good. See you at 4. I hung up and inhaled deeply. I hadn't shaken all day, but hearing his voice brought a sharp pinch to my chest. He's still the child I once rocked to sleep with old songs. I reminded myself, "Don't cry, Rebecca. Today isn't for softness. Today is for teaching." I took a blank sheet and drafted the meeting script. 1. Start gently, thank him for coming. 2. Reiterate company finances neutral, no emotion. 3. Present 5-year transfers with specific numbers. 4. Introduce the new lease. 5. Announce changes to the will, bank cards, and beneficiary status. 6. End with 1 line. Starting today, I am no longer the bailout fund. If you want to stand, stand on your own 2 feet. I wrote that sentence in bold and circled it. My handwriting trembled slightly, but my eyes were steady. At 3:45, I straightened the room. My conference space was warm with light, and on the wall hung a black and white photo of Lucas and me on his college graduation day. I looked at it for a long time. Back then, he hugged me and said, "Mom, I'll make you proud." I believed every word. Now, I don't believe, but I still hope. I hope that after today, he'll learn the lesson life hasn't taught him yet. I placed the plastic cup binder in the center of the table, uncapped a pen, and set it beside the file. In the hall, footsteps approached. The receptionist's voice came through. "Mrs. Hart, Lucas is here." I took a deep breath. "Send him in," I said, steady and sure. When the door opened, late afternoon light cut across my son's face. He wore that familiar smile, the one that used to make me forgive anything. Today, I looked at him differently, with the eyes of someone who has stopped feeding illusions. In front of me stood the son I'd rescued 3 times, and now I was ready to let him learn to swim. I gently closed the binder, laying my hand on the cover marked "Plastic Cup." "Sit down, Lucas," I said calmly. "Today we're going to tell the truth, no roles, no excuses." Outside, the sun sank, washing the sky in orange. In the quiet room, I could hear my heartbeat slow, steady, and knew my one-woman shareholders meeting had officially begun. Lucas walked into the conference room at exactly 4 p.m. His white shirt was crisp, still creased from the dry cleaner. I recognized the cut right away, the pricey brand Linda had sent me last month with a message. "Lucas needs a few for meeting clients, can you help?" I said nothing and motioned for him to sit. On the table in front of me was a blue binder labeled "Plastic Cup." Next to it lay a detailed statement of transfers totaling more than $1,027,000 over 5 years. Each number was like a pebble dropped into still water, the sound small, the ripples spreading all the way to my heart. Lucas sat down in the chair across from me, his smile a little stiff. "Mom, I'm glad you're willing to talk. Lately, Linda's been a bit sensitive. I just want everything to be peaceful." "Peaceful," I repeated. "You call taking money every month without asking if I'm okay with it peaceful?" He frowned and leaned back slightly. "Mom, I know you're busy. I didn't want to bother you." I gently opened the binder and set a pink plastic cup in the middle of the table. The light reflected off the glossy surface. The words "Best Mom Ever" were half peeled, like a wound that hadn't healed. "Lucas," I said slowly, "I want to ask you one question. Am I worth on this cup?" Some lines don't need to be shouted to make a heart tremble. What do you think measures a mother's worth? Money, gratitude, or the boundaries she dares to set? I truly want to hear your answer. Please leave a comment. The room went silent. Lucas looked at the cup, then at me, as if trying to figure out whether this was a metaphor or a rebuke. "Mom, that day was just a misunderstanding. Linda didn't mean anything by it. That cup was a gift we'd bought earlier. Stop," I cut in, still calm. "I don't need excuses for the gift. I want to talk about what it means." I turned the cup toward him, then opened the binder and flipped through the pages. "Here's a list of what I've done over the past 5 years. $50,000 for the sports company you started and then went bankrupt. $30,000 for the Italian restaurant you called your passion. $100,000 for the tech project that never materialized. $68,000 for the German car to serve clients. $20,000 for the Cancun vacation. $15,000 for baby items that never became a baby. $12,000 for jewelry, a small gift for Linda. Total, $1,025,000, and you gave me a plastic cup." My voice didn't shake, but my throat was dry. Lucas lowered his head, his hands clenched into fists. "Mom, I know I was wrong," he said, voice hoarse. "But you don't understand. Things are really hard right now. I just want to give Linda a better life." I held back a sigh. "A better life doesn't come from spending other people's money, Lucas." He looked up, a hint of desperation in his eyes. "Mom, Delilah doesn't judge me. She says everyone has tough phases. Why can't you think like she does?" I pressed my lips together and looked straight at him. "Because she's not the one paying your bills." Lucas said nothing. The air in the room thickened. I could hear the clock on the wall counting every second. "You don't get it," he finally said, voice low. "I'm about to be a father. I have responsibilities. Linda needs safety. I need stability." I leaned back, fingers interlaced. "Responsibilities?" I repeated, each word clear. "Responsibility doesn't start in my wallet. It starts with your own 2 hands." Lucas bit his lip, his eyes starting to redden. "Mom, I'm not asking for much. Just a few months. When things get better, You say that once a year, every year for 10 years. I cut in. "I've heard it enough." I pulled the first sheet from the binder and slid it toward him. "This is the account statement. I've ended all recurring transfers. Your authorized card has been canceled. Your financial access to the company has been revoked. Your name has also been removed from the life insurance. Starting today, there is no more Rebecca Hart Bank." He stared at me like he couldn't believe his ears. "Mom, you really did that?" "Yes. Everything was signed and legally confirmed this morning." Lucas shot to his feet, his voice cracking. "I can't believe you'd treat me like this. I'm your only son." I stayed seated. "And I'm the only person who stood by you for 40 years, even when everyone else walked away. You can't demand unconditional love forever." He began pacing the room. "Linda's pregnant, Mom. Do you know what that means?" "I do," I said lightly. "It means you're about to be a father. And a father doesn't use that as a reason to ask his mother for money." Lucas stopped, his shoulders trembling. I just want you to believe in me." I looked at him for a long time. Believe. I've believed in you more than I believed in myself, Lucas. I believed enough to sell my wedding ring so you could go to college. I believed enough to co-sign your debt after your first failure. But trust can't go on forever if only one person is carrying it." He was silent. No argument, no apology, just a bowed head. Late afternoon light came through the window, laying a band of gold across his dark hair, and I saw the little boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after his first day of school. My heart ached, but it wasn't the old, weak ache. It was a wound that needed to heal. I opened the drawer, took out a white envelope, and slid it to him. "This is a conditional restitution agreement." Lucas looked up, fear and doubt mixed in his eyes. "You can call it a recovery plan if you want. If you truly want to prove you're worthy, read it carefully and sign, but I won't force you." He took the envelope with shaky hands. "What is it?" "A document laying out exactly how you can rebuild my trust and your inheritance rights? Are you trying to control me down to every breath?" "No," I said evenly. "I'm setting boundaries. An adult can't live without boundaries, Lucas." He stared at the envelope like it was something foreign. I stood and walked to the window. The sunset was slipping off the building across the way, leaving one last ribbon of light on the floor. "You know," I said quietly, "when I started my business, someone asked, 'Rebecca, do you work for money or for family?' I said I worked for love because I wanted you to have the best. Turns out, love without limits kills its own value." I turned back to him. "Today I'm not taking anything from you. I'm putting you back where you belong on your own 2 feet." He still didn't speak. I knew anger, shame, and fear were fighting inside him. Finally, Lucas whispered, voice tight, "Do you really believe I can change?" I nodded. If I didn't, I wouldn't have bothered preparing that agreement. But change doesn't start with words. It starts when you're willing to face yourself. I picked up the plastic cup again and turned it in my hand. "See this cup?" I asked. "It's cheap, but it still exists. Like me, looked down on, but I'm still here, standing. The point is, I'm no longer letting anyone drink from it without paying a price." Lucas took a deep breath, his eyes conflicted. "I'll read the agreement. But I need time." "Good," I said. "I'm not in a hurry. Any lesson worth learning needs time to sink in." I set the cup back on the table, square and neat, like a stamp closing our conversation. "You can go now, and take that envelope with you. Don't let it sit in the car like an unpaid bill." He nodded and stood slowly. At the door, he turned, eyes wet. "Mom, do you still love me?" I smiled, soft as a breath. "A mother's love never ends, Lucas. But starting today, it no longer includes money." The door closed, leaving the room with the smell of cold coffee and fading sunset. I sat and looked at the plastic cup on the table. It was still there, cheap but durable, and in that moment I knew a mother's worth isn't measured by gifts, but by the boundaries she dares to set. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes when my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar line, Santa Rosa Memorial ER. I paused. An instinct that once saved me in risky deals kicked in again. I answered, "Mrs. Hart, we're calling from the emergency room. Patient Lila Cole was brought in at 7:42 p.m. after a car collision. Your name is listed as the emergency contact." I was silent for a few seconds, thinking I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say? Why me?" The nurse answered evenly, "Miss Cole doesn't have family nearby, and your number is in her insurance file." I pressed my hand to my forehead as a wave of fatigue spread across my shoulders. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed again, Lucas. I picked up. His voice was awkward. "Mom, I'm sorry. Linda's home with bad morning sickness, and I had to go to a meeting, so I used your name as the primary contact. You're more available, and you're closer to the hospital." I let out a dry laugh despite the bitter taste. Available and closed, so that's why I get tied into the lives of people who look down on me. Fine, I said coolly. I'll go. The hospital was bright with white lights. I walked through the antiseptic hall and saw Delilah on a bed, leg in a cast, shoulder bandaged. Same, face light makeup, pale lipstick, pride intact. She looked at me, briefly flustered, then slipped back into her usual poise. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. My car was hit at an intersection. Thankfully, it's just a minor fracture. I pulled up a chair. It's fine. They called because my name is on the file. She gave a small, stiff smile. Lucas or Linda must have filled it in wrong. They're a bit casual. I looked at her. Yes, they're very casual, sometimes with other people's money. Delilah, and looked away as if she hadn't heard. She changed the subject to the weather, then said, Rebecca, I really appreciate you coming. Lucas says you're always willing to help. Not everyone has a heart like that. I answered quietly. Hearts have limits too, Delilah, just like bank accounts. About an hour later, the doctor cleared her for discharge. I helped Delilah to the car, though she tried to refuse. No need, I can call a taxi. Don't worry, I said evenly. I bought this car myself, so at least let me use it properly. She flinched slightly. When the door closed, the silence grew uncomfortable. Streetlights slid across her face, each beam tracing deeper lines of pride. I broke the silence. Delilah, I have a question. That $30,000 diamond ring Lucas gave you on Mother's Day, and the Caribbean cruise voucher for your birthday last month, do you know who paid for those? She turned, brow faintly furrowed. Lucas gave them to me. He said it was a bonus from the company. I smirked. A bonus? Interesting. I opened my phone, pulled up the plastic cup folder, and showed the screenshots. May 5th, $30,000 to Daloon Jewelers. June 19th, $12,400 to Royal Caribbean Limited. I held the screen up. Do these dates ring a bell? Delilah went quiet. The blue light reflected in her eyes. Her face went a shade paler. I didn't know, she said softly. I didn't think. I know. I cut in. You didn't think, you just enjoyed. She gripped the edge of her gown, voice trembling. Rebecca, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was your money. I assumed that my son was successful and generous, right? That I was the mother willingly backing him, and that it was a given? Delilah lowered her head. Her voice turned raspy. I was wrong to enable it. I saw your generosity and thought, it was endless. I looked out the window as the light streaked past the trees. Nothing is endless, Delilah. Not money, and certainly not kindness. I pulled over and faced her. You once taught Linda that a woman should marry someone who can take care of her, didn't you? She nodded slightly. Then today, I want you to ask your daughter what she herself has taken care of in the life she's enjoying. Delilah pressed her lips together and stayed quiet. For a few seconds, she stared at her hands, the ones that had worn that sparkling ring she now seemed unable to look at. I opened my contacts, called Lucas, and put it on speaker. Lucas, I said when he picked up, I'm sitting with your mother-in-law. He hesitated on the other end. Mom, why are you two? I handed the phone to Delilah. She has something to ask. Delilah looked at me, then took the phone. Her voice was low and clear. Lucas, I just want to know one thing. The ring you gave me, where did the money come from? Silence on the line. A hiss of air. I thought the call had dropped, then heard Lucas's rough voice. Mom, don't misunderstand. I don't need excuses, Delilah said, sharper than I'd ever heard her. I asked, where did the money come from? Silence. Then a deep breath. From Mom, Rebecca. She closed her eyes, as if the answer confirmed what she feared most. I understand, she said, and handed the phone back. I kept it brief. Lucas, I'm not going to argue. I just want you to know everything has changed. Learn to live on your own effort." All I heard was his quick breathing. Then the call ended. Immediately after, my phone buzzed non-stop texts from Linda. "Mom, my card isn't working. Transaction declined. I need money urgently. The baby needs vitamins. Could you transfer just $2,000 to me? Did you see my messages?" 4 texts in under 2 minutes. I showed them to Delilah. She exhaled and said slowly, "Linda doesn't know how to stop." I raised her, believing things would always be handled, that someone would always step in. "Exactly like Lucas," I said. Delilah leaned back, staring straight ahead. "Maybe I need to talk to my daughter. I can't let her become a version of me." We rode in silence the rest of the way. At her house, she opened the door carefully, then turned back to me. "Rebecca," she said softly, "you have every right to be angry, but I hope you won't hate us. We're mothers after all." I looked at her for a long moment. A breeze lifted the silver strands on her forehead. "No, I don't hate anyone, Delilah. I'm just revoking the priority pass they've used for too long." She gave a sad smile and squeezed my hand. "I'll talk to my daughter. It's time the kids learn to earn, not just to spend." I nodded. "Good. Because starting today, easy money is over." On the drive home, I cracked the window and let the cold night air sweep through my hair. The city glittered like a river of broken gold, and yet I felt strangely clear. There was no sense of victory, just a quiet calm. The peace of someone who finally cleaned a room she'd been afraid to enter. I knew this fight wasn't over. Lucas and Linda would react, justify, try to negotiate. But tonight, I had something they couldn't buy with all the money they'd ever asked for: peace of mind. And at 70, I realized sometimes the strongest thing a mother can do isn't to give, but to stop giving. By the time I pulled in, it was late. The street outside the gate was damp with dew, the streetlight a dusty gold across memories no one wanted to touch. I had barely turned off the engine when I saw Lucas waiting at the door, hands in his pockets, tired but still wearing that crisp shirt. I wasn't surprised. A man pampered his whole life never lets the ending be, "The money's gone." "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk again? I'm just asking for a delay. Give me more time to sort things out." I didn't answer right away. I walked past him, unlocked the door, then turned back. "Lucas, I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm just repeating what I said. Everything has boundaries. When you cross them, you deal with the consequences." He sighed, gripping the doorframe. "Are you pushing me out of your life?" I was calm. "No, I'm inviting you to step out of my wallet." Lucas lowered his head, silent. Looking at my son, I suddenly saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, the fear of living without a rescuer. Before I could close the door, Linda appeared. She hurried up, face flushed, eyes brimming. "You're cruel!" She burst into tears. "Do you want our family to fall apart?" "Lucas lost his job. I'm pregnant. And you cut the money like we're not even your family." I stayed quiet and let her vent. Linda's voice climbed higher, every word laced with wounded pride. "You call yourself a good mother, a good grandmother? No one treats their family like this. The whole town will know how stingy you are." I looked at her, no anger, no pity. Then I picked up the small remote on the table and turned on the living room TV. The first clip rolled, Linda in the kitchen, talking on the phone. "Mom, Rebecca, this crib is on sale today. If you transfer the money soon, I can place the order." The second, "Mom, Lucas's car maintenance cost an extra $1,200. Could you transfer it? I'll pay you back at the end of the month." The third, "Mom, this Cancun trip is a chance for Lucas to close a new deal. Don't be cheap, I guarantee it'll pay off." Her voice rang out clearly, every syllable crisp. When the videos ended, the room felt vacuumed of air. "Those are 3 of 12 times you called to ask for money in 8 months, I said evenly, not counting the texts. Linda's mouth fell open, eyes wide. Lucas turned to his wife, face pale. You recorded us?" Linda's voice shook. "No, the security cameras did," I said. "There's a warning sign on the door. Everything is fully legal." Right then, Tessa Nguyen, my 16-year-old niece whom I've raised since she was little, stepped out of the hallway holding a stack of printouts. "I'm sorry to cut in, but Grandma asked me to print these message threads," Tessa said softly, setting the pile on the table. Linda stared. "Who is this girl?" "Tessa," I said. "My niece, my sister's daughter. She grew up in this house on scholarships, not a dime from me." Tessa calmly opened the first page. "These are the texts you sent Mrs. Rebecca over the last year. 46 in total. 39 include the phrase, 'Could you transfer?'" Silence settled over the room. Lucas looked down, lips trembling. For the first time, he had to face reality not through his wife's telling, but through evidence. Tessa went on. "I once heard my mom say kindness only means something when the recipient is grateful. If they turn it into an entitlement, it isn't kindness anymore." Linda ground her teeth. "This kid doesn't understand anything. We're just going through a rough patch." I cut in. "Hard times don't give anyone the right to turn another person into a walking wallet." I pulled an envelope and set it on the table between the three of us. "These are the 3 conditions. I'm not forcing you to sign, but if you truly want to earn back trust, read them carefully." Lucas looked up. 3 conditions?" I nodded. 1. Live, for 1 year without my money. No transfers, no authorized cards, no co-signing. 2. Treat me like a person, not a sponsor. 3. Apologize publicly. Not to praise me, but so you learn to take responsibility. I looked straight into Lucas's eyes. "If you do all 3, I'll reopen the will and share equity again. If not, I'll consider myself childless." Linda shot to her feet, face flushed. "Who do you think you are to set conditions like that? We don't need your money anymore." "Fine, we'll move out. We'll go live with my mother where no one humiliates us like this." I stayed seated, voice light as air. "Even better, be independent, Linda. That's step 1 in learning to be an adult." She choked, then tugged at Lucas's arm. "Let's go." But Lucas didn't move. He looked at me, conflicted. "Mom, I don't want it to end like this." "It isn't ending, Lucas," I said softly. "It's starting over the right way." When they left the house, I took the keys from the drawer and locked the home I'd bought for them. I wasn't angry anymore. Every feeling had hardened into a thick, steady calm. I set the new lease on the table and signed my name, Rebecca Hart, owner. I added a small line at the bottom, effective the day you learn the word independence. I slipped a copy into an envelope and sent it to my attorney, Marion Blake. That evening, Tessa brought me a cup of chamomile tea. She sat beside me and asked quietly, "Are you sad?" I smiled. "Of course. But sadness doesn't mean regret. Some doors need to close so the wind stops blowing straight into your heart." Tessa nodded. "You know, when I watched those videos of Miss Linda asking for money, I thought of my mom. She used to say, 'Never turn love into debt.'" I set my hand on her shoulder. "And you just reminded me of that lesson too." We sat in silence, listening to the clock tick. I looked around the house now. Just 2 women, 2 generations, sharing one thing: self-respect. Before bed, I went into my office, opened a drawer, and took out the pink plastic cup. Best mom ever had faded, but it didn't hurt anymore. I set it neatly on the desk beside the lease and the plastic cup binder. It would stay there as a reminder of my worth, not measured in money, but in the right to say no. I turned off the lights and walked to my bedroom. The door clicked softly behind me. For the first time in years, I didn't need a nightlight. No fear of a morning call for money, no dread of urgent texts. I lay down and listened to my heartbeat steady. Outside the window, the night breeze slipped by like a late lullaby. And as my eyelids grew heavy, I smiled because at last, after 70 years, I'd learned how to sleep peacefully in my own home. 3 days later, before the sun rose over the Santa Rosa Hills, I was in my office with a new binder on the desk, its title in bold, 3 Conditions for Restitution. I reread every line I'd written, tightening each sentence so it was clear, no bitterness, but no room for confusion. This wasn't a sentence, it was a guide back to decency. I scheduled Lucas and Linda for Monday morning. They arrived on time, maybe to prove they were serious. Lucas was neatly dressed but looked tired. For the first time, Linda came without makeup. They sat without speaking. I slid the binder toward them. These are the conditions I mentioned. I want you to read them carefully, not like a contract, but like an ethical commitment. Lucas opened to the first page, eyes skimming the bold lines. Condition 1. Within 12 months from the date of signing, Lucas and Linda may not receive any financial support from me or from Heart and Loom. No transfers, no authorized cards, no short-term loans, no co-signing. If you violate this even once, the agreement becomes permanently void. I looked at them and spoke slowly. This isn't because I'm stingy, but because I need to know whether you can live without leaning on me. It's the first test 12 months of growing up. Linda frowned. Do you know how hard life is right now? Rent, insurance, hospital. I do. I cut in. I lived through days of canned noodles and tap water, but I didn't call anyone for money. You can do the same. Lucas squeezed his wife's hand, voice smaller. Mom, if we try and it's still not enough, then you learn to cut what you don't need, I said. Fewer fancy meals, fewer trips, less showing off. Being broke isn't shameful. Pretending you're not is. Condition 2. Act like real family. Call to check on me at least twice a month, not to ask for money. Invite me to important occasions, birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, or any family milestone. If there's conflict, handle it with respect, not blame. I looked up straight at Lucas. I don't need flowers or gifts just to be remembered as a person, not an ATM. Lucas nodded slowly, eyes starting to redden. Linda stayed quiet, lips pressed tight, but her gaze had softened. I went on. I lost my husband early and devoted my life to raising you. If you can't call just to ask, "How are you, Mom?" then no matter how much I leave you, you're still poor. Condition 3. Apologize publicly in front of the family, especially to me and Delilah Cole, for abusing trust and finances. No tears required, just honesty. If the apology is made and respect is maintained for at least 1 year, I will consider restoring a portion of the inheritance, but never 100%. Because the harm happened, and the only thing that can't fully return is trust. I closed the packet, voice slow but firm. These 3 aren't punishments. They're the only door back. If you pass through, I'll reopen part of the estate, but I'll never go back to the way it was. The past taught me the most expensive lesson. Love without limits is self-destruction. Lucas sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up the pen and signed. His hand shook, the ink smudged a corner, but the signature was clear enough to stand. Linda looked down at the page, then at her husband. She hesitated, didn't want to sign, but didn't dare walk out. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "I need time to think." "That's fine," I said. "You can take a lifetime to think. But this agreement only takes effect when both of you sign." Linda bit her lip, then exhaled hard. She signed messy, never meeting my eyes. I set another packet on the table. "This is the lease. The house you live in is in my name, but starting this month, you'll be legal tenants. Rent is market rate, not higher, not lower. Everything is due on time. No priority, no exceptions." Lucas stared at the paper. "Do you really want to turn us into strangers?" I shook my head. "No. I want you to become normal people. People who pay for what they use." I held out the keys but kept the paper. "When you pay the first month, I'll hand over the keys officially." Lucas nodded, voice hoarse. I understand. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that looked like understanding. A week later, the Mothers Left Behind Fund officially launched. I held an internal meeting at Heart and Loom, no fanfare, just a warm morning with longtime staff. I stood at the podium and looked at the faces that had weathered so many storms with me, women who'd worked night shifts, brought cold rice to the sewing floor, cried when they were laid off, then came back when we recovered. This fund, I said, isn't just named for mothers left behind, it's to protect their dignity. No one deserves to be treated as a burden just because she's grown old. Applause rose. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. I announced, starting this year, 10% of Heart and Loom's net profit will go to the fund for the first 2 years. We don't just stitch clothes, we stitch torn lives. Tessa stood beside me in a white shirt. She asked to be the first volunteer. Grandma, I want to help women like you once were, she said, eyes bright. I smoothed her hair and smiled. You won't just help them, Tessa. You'll be my eyes and heart seeing what I can't anymore, feeling what I once forgot. That afternoon we tidied the office. Tessa pinned our new logo on the wall, Mothers Left Behind Where Strength Has No Age. Below it, I placed the pink plastic cup on the shelf. It sat there quietly in a wash of golden sunlight. Something once cheap had become a symbol of rebirth, mine, the company's, and of every woman who'd been dismissed. By evening, I sat in the garden when my phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. Mom, we reread the agreement. We'll try to keep our word. I know I was wrong. Another line. A few minutes later. Linda's not saying much yet, but she's out looking for a job. I'll send the rent on time. I set the phone down and nodded slightly. It wasn't their remorse that eased me, but the sign of growing up. Maybe he didn't fully understand, but at least he'd started walking. I looked at the twilight deepening, the breeze stirring the lavender rose I once planted with calloused hands. Now they draped the steps, faintly fragrant like a belief stitched back together. I'm not hoping for Lucas to kneel and apologize, nor for Linda to sob in my arms. I just hope that someday, when they face the mirror in the morning, they'll see the people who raised them, not with money, but with endurance. I leaned back and closed my eyes. In the soft wind, I could almost hear Frank, my late husband, whisper somewhere, "You did the right thing, Rebecca. It's time to let them walk." I smiled, peaceful. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't forgiving others, it's stopping the payments for their mistakes. The first 2 months of the agreement were chaos. People used to being rescued will always test where the new boundary is. Lucas did exactly that. Week 1. He called at midnight. Voice raspy. Mom, I paid the rent late just 2 days. Can you transfer something for now? I'll pay you back next month. I replied with 2 words. No. No explanation. No. Softening. Week 2, another call. Mom, Linda had an allergic reaction. The doctor says she needs imported meds. I don't have enough. The hospital takes insurance, I said, and hung up. Week 3, texts poured in. The crib sale ends today. Help me a little so I can order. I set my phone down, finished my chamomile tea, and deleted the message. No reply. In the second month, Linda showed up at my door. She didn't scream like before. She pleaded, trying to sound calm. Rebecca, I understand you're upset, but you're making everything harder. We're expecting a baby. You're the grandmother, you should help. I stayed quiet. Before I could answer, Tessa stepped out from the study and stood beside me. Miss Linda, she said, gentle but steady, my grandma and I agreed on boundaries. Please don't cross them. Linda glared. Who do you think you are to lecture me? Tessa smiled. I'm only reminding you of what you promised. Her words made me ache and glow with pride at once. I set a hand on my granddaughter's shoulder and said, Tessa, go back inside. Then to Linda, I don't hate you, Linda. But love means nothing if it's treated as an obligation. You came today to ask for money. I won't open this door a second time. Linda stood frozen, eyes wet, but I didn't waver. She left without a word. I shut the door, leaned against the wall, and took a long breath. Inside, my heart still twinged. Saying no to someone who once called you Mom is never easy. But every time I weakened, I remembered that Mother's Day night when a plastic cup was set before me like a joke. And I reminded myself, there are no more rescue funds. I poured all my energy into the Mothers Left Behind Fund. Our first case arrived. Mrs. Mercedes Franklin, 72, pressured by her son into signing her house away. When I met her, she wore a faded gray dress, hands shaking but voice still warm. My son said I'm old, and I don't know anything about legal stuff. I laughed, signed just to make him happy, and lost my house. Hearing her story, my chest tightened. A picture of myself from a few months ago flashed back, another mother treated as if she'd outlived her role. But Mrs. Mercedes wasn't angry. She simply said, "Thank goodness for your fund. I don't need the house back, just a place to read and make tea." I held her hand and saw in her eyes something Lucas had lost: dignity in the middle of hardship. That afternoon, when Mrs. Mercedes received her first support check, I stood by the window and watched the sunlight spill into the yard. For the first time in months, I felt truly useful. No one at the company asked about my family, but I could feel a different kind of respect. They no longer saw me as a soft-hearted mom or a boss who only knew kindness. They saw I kept boundaries, and that gave my words weight again. An old employee, Maribel, told me during a break, "Mrs. Hart, I used to think you were too nice." Now I get it, being kind without limits is digging your own grave. I smiled. Exactly. It's never too late to teach people to respect you. In the evenings, Tessa and I went through the list of cases to help. She took notes. I reviewed files. I realized that even in my 70s, I was still learning not to control, just to take responsibility for my part. I no longer chased after people to save them. I gave them tools to stand up on their own, just like I'd forced Lucas to do. In mid-March, I got a handwritten letter. The paper smelled of lavender, the script slanted. "Rebecca, I owe you a thank you. I reviewed all the evidence and understand I helped make my daughter dependent. I will teach Linda again, not with money, but with gratitude." Delilah Cole. When I finished reading, I didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. Maybe Delilah and I learned the same lesson, the lesson of mothers who thought they were helping, but were actually harming. In April, Lucas called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mom, could you help me with a little startup money?" "I promise I'll pay it back." I smiled and gave one answer: no. No anger, no blame, no explanation. I hung up and made tea with Tessa. Then Linda sent an email, the tone softer. "If you won't help, at least let me borrow your name to get a loan." I hit delete. For the first time, my hand didn't shake when I said no. In May, Linda showed up outside Heart and Loom. I was about to get in the car when I saw her walking up, belly bigger now, eyes puffy. "Rebecca, do you really feel no guilt?" "Guilt?" I echoed. "For leaving your son to struggle when you clearly can help?" I looked at her and spoke slowly. "Linda, I used to think helping meant giving money. Now I know helping means teaching people not to need me. You and Lucas need that more than anything." She said nothing and turned away. Her back looked small in the sun. I didn't feel satisfied, just a thin thread of sadness, snapped, and no longer worth tying. I still love my son. I love him quietly, not with money. Every night I still open my phone and look at photos of Lucas as a child, messy hair, chocolate on his lips, eyes full of hope. I whisper, "My boy, I'm not abandoning you. I'm waiting for you to come back on your own two hands." Some nights I still wrestle with it, but strangely, I don't wake in a panic anymore. No more emergency calls, no more pleading emails. The house is quiet but not lonely. Tessa often laughs. Grandma sleeps like someone who just paid off all her debts, I answer, because that's exactly what happened. At the end of June, as sunset washed the yard in pale orange, my phone rang. I hesitated when I saw Lucas's name but picked up. His voice was deeper and calmer. "Mom, I want to take you to lunch. No money talk, I promise." I paused. Part of me stayed guarded. Another part trembled, a mix of joy and fear. "Where?" I asked. "The old place you like by the river. Noon tomorrow." I heard him take a deep breath on the other end, like he was fighting to keep his promise. I smiled slightly. "Okay, I'll be there." That night, I sat by the window and watched the city lights float up into the dark sky. 6 months without a rescue fund, 6 months of tears, anger, and swallowing my impulses, but also the first 6 months of my life not letting anyone take my power. I poured more tea, watched the steam rise, and thought about tomorrow's lunch. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew this. If a hand reached out this time, it would be to hold, not to take. The restaurant Lucas picked tucked up against a small river, the same spot with the old wooden table where we used to sit on his birthdays. I remembered the smell of toasted bread and laughter from those poor but peaceful years. Now I sat again with the son who once broke my heart, not in a fancy place, but a modest diner with plastic chairs and recycled napkins. Lucas arrived early. He stood when I walked in, thinner, sun-browned. For the first time in years, his eyes were clear, honest, and steady. "I called because I wanted to talk, not to ask," he said, pulling out my chair. "Don't worry, I'm paying today." I glanced around. The hand-painted menu board read, "Soup of the day, $8.99, grilled chicken, $12.50. I nodded and smiled. Then I'm at ease. Lucas ordered 2 grilled chickens and waters. No wine, no pricey coffee, no bragging. When the server left, he sat quietly for a moment and then spoke slowly. "I sold the German car. I'm driving a coworker's old pickup now." I stayed quiet and waited. We also moved to a smaller apartment on the east side. Linda's teaching part-time at a language school, and I'm picking up weekend shifts at the warehouse. It's tiring, but it feels real. For the first time, I know what it's like to earn what I spend. I looked at his hand, slightly rougher now, a bit of sundark on his thumb. Time really does teach in ways parents can't buy. He lowered his head, voice smaller. "I used to treat you like a talking ATM. I'm ashamed when I think about it. Now I feel like I'm finally becoming a real man." I didn't interrupt. Sometimes a mother's silence is the only mirror clear enough for a child to see himself. Lucas lifted a small baby girl from the bassinet beside him. I froze, surprised. "Mom, this is Mia," he said hoarsely. "Our daughter." She opened her eyes and grabbed my finger with that tiny hand. The feeling, both strange and familiar, sent a soft current through my heart. Lucas went on, eyes drifting. "I think, if someday Mia treated me the way I treated you, I couldn't bear it." He paused, voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Mom. Not for the money, for making you feel meaningless in the home you built." I looked at my son and softened. I didn't cry, the tears for anger dried long ago, but I felt something thaw inside. I touched his hand lightly. "You don't need to say more, Lucas. I'm not erasing the conditions, but I see, maybe you're on the right path." We ate in quiet. The clink of cutlery, a breeze off the river rattling the roof. The air wasn't awkward, just calm, like 2 people catching their breath after a storm. Lucas looked up and asked, "Mom, what can I do to make it right?" I set down my fork and met his eyes. "Some debts can't be paid with money. Live decently, consistently, work hard, be good to your wife and child, and never borrow the name of family to ask for pity. That's enough." He nodded, eyes wet but clear. "I'll remember." Suddenly the door opened. A familiar figure stepped in, Lila Cole. Elegant as ever, beige coat, neat bun, but today her face was gentler. "Rebecca," she said softly, "Lucas told me you two were having lunch." I don't want to intrude, but there's something I need to return. She set a small velvet box on the table and opened it, the $30,000 diamond ring. Light scattered off the stone, but this time it wasn't showy, it felt like restitution. I want you to take it back, Delilah said slowly, because that gift wasn't clean. It was bought with your money, not my son's. Lucas lowered his head and closed his eyes. I looked at the ring, then at Delilah. Thank you for the gesture, I said quietly. But I don't need anything back. If you'd like, donate it to the Mothers Left Behind Fund. It'll mean more there. Delilah smiled this time with her eyes, not a practiced face. Then I will, she said. Thank you for teaching me and my daughter that kindness doesn't include the right to take. Lucas looked up and whispered, Thank you, Mom Delilah. She set a hand on his shoulder. Live in a way that honors the mother who brought you into this world. Her words shook me. For a brief moment, the three of us, three mothers in different ways, finally met in the same place. Understanding. When Delilah left, only the wind remained. Lucas rocked Mia gently. I looked at father and daughter and saw a familiar yet new scene. The once dependent son holding what's truly his. I stood and said, This lunch wasn't cheap, Lucas. Not because of the price, because it held the most valuable things. The courage to apologize and the resolve not to repeat. He stood and hugged me. A real hug, the first in years. No tears, no promises, just warmth. I heard my son's heartbeat, steady, and in that moment, I knew I'd walked the necessary stretch of pain to arrive here. That afternoon, I went home and opened the worn leather journal on my desk, my wake-up diary. I wrote, Forgiveness isn't wiping a debt, it's closing the old ledger so you can write a new page. Today my son laid the first brick on, and his way back. I don't know how far he'll go, but I know I've stopped being the headwind. Forgiveness is a two-way street, and today we both walked halfway. I shut the journal and looked out at the garden. Evening light fell on the lavender Tessa and I planted. In that glow, the pink plastic cup on my desk caught the light, not a symbol of humiliation anymore, but a clean start. I smiled and said to myself, My lesson ends here. But our life is just beginning again. 1 year after that lunch, with the lavender blooming through another season, I realized the most miraculous thing about time. It doesn't heal by magic. It heals through small, steady actions. Exactly what I'd told Lucas. That day, my son completed all 3 conditions. No more calls for money, no financial emergencies. Instead, real calls, Mom, I just got a temporary promotion, or Mom, I'm making soup this weekend, come over. Linda changed too. No more pleading emails, now she sent photos from school fundraisers, a small table, a sign reading, Bake sale for single moms, and a bright smile without a mask. On the evening of the 1-year mark, the whole family gathered in the living room. Not the fancy house downtown, but the old place in Santa Rosa where I rebuilt my boundaries. Linda stood first, hands shaking a little but voice clear. Rebecca and family. I want to apologize not just for what I said, but for believing love could be exploited. I forgot that someone's kindness isn't an obligation. Thank you for not giving up on us, even though you had every reason to. No one clapped. A soft quiet spread through the room, not awkward, but accepting. Lucas slipped an arm around her shoulders. In his eyes I saw what I'd longed to see for years, the light of a man who'd finally grown up. A few days later I met with my attorney, Marion Blake. We sat at the old wooden table where I'd signed so many contracts this time. A new will. I pointed to each clause. 60% of my assets and Heart and Loom shares will go to the Mothers Left Behind Fund. The remaining 40% will be split among Lucas, Tessa, and the key employees who've stood with me for more than 3 decades. But I added one condition. Before receiving their shares, Everyone must complete the family finance course run by the fund and undergo an independent audit to prove they can manage money responsibly. Marion smiled. You still don't fully trust anyone, do you? It's not about mistrust, I said. I trust discipline more than kindness. Then I called Lucas to the office. He sat across from me, steady in a simple shirt and an old watch he said meant he'd stopped chasing brands. Lucas, I said, I want you on the fund's advisory council. Unpaid seat, 12-month term. You don't need to do something big, just listen and learn. He blinked. Unpaid? I laughed. If you only work for money, you're not ready for that table. He chuckled and nodded. I get it. I'll do it. Linda later picked up a role in community fundraising. She organized free classes for single moms using her language skills to connect them with donors. I didn't say much. I watched. But inside, I knew she'd redirected her energy from demanding to giving. The biggest surprise was Lila Cole. She called me on a Monday morning, sounding energized. Rebecca, I want to help. I left my school job, but I can speak, and I want to say what matters. A few weeks later, she became the fund's community ambassador. Her first talk was titled, Praise Doesn't Replace Responsibility. On stage, she spoke about the gap between flattering kids and actually raising them. I used to think praise was love, she said, but I learned praise doesn't prevent mistakes, only responsibility does. The audience stood and applauded. I sat in the front row watching her, and strangely, I felt we'd become allies. At Heart and Loom, I rolled out a family no special privileges policy. No one is allowed to use company funds for personal expenses. Every invoice goes through an external audit. A few employees felt constrained at first, but after just a few months the results were clear. Cleaner costs, better productivity, and most importantly, a culture of accountability spreading through the place. At the all-hands meeting, I said, transparency doesn't kill humanity, it protects it from becoming a tool. Everyone stood and applauded. I knew that was when the company truly grew up, not just in revenue, but in ethics. Tessa, my little niece, won a full scholarship to med school this year. I remember the night we got the news. She burst into my office, waving the acceptance letter, shouting, "Grandma, I did it!" I hugged her, and the tears just came. "I'm so proud of you," I said. "But remember, stay humble. Knowledge without compassion is just a sharp knife." Tessa nodded, eyes shining like a small lamp. "I'll remember, Grandma, and I'll be a doctor not to make money, but to help people like Mrs. Mercedes." Hearing that, I knew the seed of kindness had sprouted in the right direction. A few months later, Lucas and I visited mothers supported by the fund. We went to see Mrs. Carolyn, an 80-year-old who lives alone with 2 cats. Lucas listened while she talked about the years her son disappeared, no letters, no calls. She smiled sadly. "Now I just want to know he's alive. That's enough." I looked at Lucas, his eyes were red. On the drive back, he stayed quiet a long time, then said, "Mom, I get it now. Turns out this pain isn't just ours. You didn't just save yourself, you saved me from becoming that kind of person." I put a hand on his shoulder. "No one is born knowing how to be a parent or a child. We only learn sometimes by losing." He nodded and squeezed my hand. Lightly. No promises needed. Just real presence. When we got home, I opened the financial files and glanced over the fund's dashboard. More than 100 women helped, 13 fully reintegrated cases, 7 homes bought back with low-interest loans. Numbers don't tell everything, but I know each one is a story of survival. I leaned back and looked out the window. The lavender still bloomed, but now there were other hands tending it. Lucas's, Linda's, the very people who once hurt me most now helping me replant this garden. That night I wrote the final line in my journal. "I once mistook legacy for money. Now I understand. True legacy is the ability to stand after you fall, and the way we teach others to respect the limits of love." I'm ready to reopen my heart, but I will never again reopen a faucet of unconditional money. I closed the journal and set down the pen. Outside, the night breeze stirred the purple lavender, its scent drifting through the house, and I knew our family, after so much wreckage, had finally been rebuilt. 2 years later, Mother's Day arrived with the warm smell of coffee filling the kitchen and soft laughter floating from the living room. I woke to morning sunlight through the curtains and heard Tessa call, "Grandma, get up, someone's making cappuccino worse than you do." I laughed. Stepping out of my room, I saw a scene I hadn't dared to dream of 2 years earlier. Lucas at the stove stirring coffee, sleeves rolled, and beside him, Linda helping Mia now 4 sprinkle crumbs over heart-shaped cookies. At the table, Delilah arranged a fruit platter, hair grayer, face calm and kind. The house brimmed with voices and laughter. No old tension, no wary glances, just warmth. Lucas came over and took my hand. "Mom, I didn't buy anything expensive today, but I think you'll like this more." He handed me a small box wrapped in plain craft paper. I opened it, a simple silver ring with a tiny engraving inside, "For the woman who taught us dignity." I looked at the ring, and a strange feeling rose, not pride, not sentimentality, but a deep, quiet peace. It cost under $200, yet it was the most valuable gift of my life, because for the first time in years, it was paid for with the truth, not obligation. Linda set a blue album on the table. On the cover, in Tessa's handwriting, "Rebecca, the hands that built a home." I opened it, each page a journey. A photo of me in the first sewing shop with 6 workers and an old clattering fan. The first contract signed with a small Dallas chain, my handwriting shaky but sure. A picture of my simple dinner with Lucas during his college years, just instant noodles, but his eyes were so bright. Then handwritten notes from workers. "Because of you, I have a home." A letter from Tessa. "You taught me that love isn't sacrificing everything, but keeping enough of yourself to keep loving." Finally, photos of the grandmothers from the Mothers Left Behind Fund, their faces lit by the warm glow of group meetings. I turned each page, the soft rustle sounding like the heartbeat of time. Lucas stood beside me, arm around Linda, and read aloud a paragraph he wrote. "Mom, I hurt you because I thought love could be taken without limit. Now I understand, limits are what make love last. I promise the final years of your life will be your happiest, not with money, but with presence." I squeezed his hand. "I don't need you to make up for anything. Just remember, love with discipline is love that's real." Linda wiped her eyes and nodded. "I've learned that, Rebecca, and I want to teach it to Mia. On the wooden shelf where I once put that pink plastic cup, there's a new frame. Inside are the cup and the silver ring, side by side." I looked at them. 2 gifts, one from a dark past, one from a clear present, together in a single frame, from humiliation to education, from tears to freedom. That is the full cycle of a mother who learned to stop at the right time. That afternoon, I went upstairs, opened my computer, and signed the final update to my will. Heart and Loom now has 2 official operators, Lucas and Tessa. The Mothers Left Behind Fund is set to receive a fixed percentage of annual profits, untouchable and unsellable. I no longer hold absolute power, and that is real freedom. My legacy is no longer in a safe, it's in how those after me choose to live. That evening, while the family gathered around the table, Mia ran over and grabbed my hand. "Grandma, is your ring on yet?" I bent down and let her slide the silver ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if measured by memory. I closed the blue album and looked at the final words on the cover. Plastic cup, 2 simple words holding a lifetime of learning how to keep dignity inside love. I exhaled, relieved. The circle was complete. As dusk fell over the lavender garden, I sat by the window and watched the family below, Lucas laughing with Tessa, Linda steadying little Mia as she picked flowers. Their laughter drifted into the breeze, warm enough to thaw my heart. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Frank, do you see it? This house has truly come home. And now, if you listening to me have lived through similar wounds, I hope my story gives you a little peace." Love and boundaries can coexist. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to live lighter. If you've been a parent, been hurt, or learned to stand after betrayal, leave me a comment, tell me where you're from, or what helped you find your strength. And if you believe stories like this still need to be told, please like, subscribe, and stay for the journeys ahead. I'm grateful you're here listening, empathizing, and joining me in proving it's never too late to begin again stronger and kinder. Mom, don't contact us anymore. Our whole family needs space. The text from my son arrived on the night of my 67th birthday, right as I was setting a chocolate mousse cake, his childhood favorite, on the dining table. I had waited for him all day. Every time a car passed, I looked up. Every time my phone buzzed, I let myself hope. And then what I got was a cold sentence passed on a mother's love. The doorbell rang. My daughter-in-law stood there with a blade-thin smile and a folder in her hand. Guardianship papers. "Sign them so I can take better care of you." I looked into her eyes, and in that instant I understood. What they wanted to keep wasn't me, it was the $50 million I control. Sign? No. I smiled, opened a drawer, and pressed the tiny recorder button under the wooden table. They didn't know that the very moment they thought they were cutting me out was when I began erasing them from my life. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Estelle Raymond, 67, widowed 8 years. I live alone in an old Upper East Side apartment, the home Grant, my late husband, and I shared for 3 decades. He died of a stroke while golfing in Arizona. In that moment, my world collapsed, but at least I still had my son Adrian, the one remaining hope. Grant was calm, practical, and good at investing. He didn't leave a gushy will. He built a family trust with asset protection terms. I'm the primary beneficiary with full authority over the income real estate shares, stocks, bonds, and an investment fund worth about $50 million. When he died, people said I was lucky. But losing your partner and being left with only money that isn't luck, it's a test. I once thought at least I still had my son and a family. To fill the emptiness, I started giving too much, too easily. In the first year after Grant died, Adrian got divorced. I paid his attorney fees and rented him an apartment in Westchester so he could stabilize. A year. Later, he remarried Tessa, a young, beautiful, sharp woman who used to work in PR, and I foolishly paid for the lavish Long Island wedding. I gifted them a honeymoon in Italy and covered the down payment on their new house in Westport, the place they called our dream home. I did it all not to show off, but because I thought that was love. I wanted my son never to struggle the way his parents once had. I didn't realize that when you give without asking for gratitude, people start treating kindness like an obligation. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, or birthday, I prepped gifts, checks, transfers. All they had to say was, "Mom, we're a bit tight," and I opened my wallet. A walking ATM, like people joke online, maybe that was me. But this year was different. My kitchen tonight was still, lit only by candles flickering against Grant's framed photo. The chocolate mousse cake smelled rich, its surface still glossy. I had mixed the batter with arthritic hands, each stir a memory of when Adrian was small, a curly-haired boy grinning wide, begging for the biggest slice with the most frosting. I'd texted him in the morning, "Birthday cake is ready. Come by any time." No reply. By afternoon, I told myself he was busy. That night, when the clock struck 8 p.m., I turned on the porch light and set out plates for 3, me, Adrian, and Tessa. Each time a car went by, I stood up, heart racing, only to be disappointed. When the text, "Mom, don't contact us anymore, our whole family needs space," appeared, I thought I'd misread it. I sat frozen, watched the candle tremble and go out. Only me remained and the truth. I had lost my son. Not for lack of love, but for loving too much. 3 days later, the cake still sat there. No one came. No birthday wish. Not a single flower. On the 4th day, I lifted the lid. The cream had turned sour. I wiped my eyes and scraped it into the trash, the spoon clanging against the sink like metal, striking my heart. I didn't know if I was crying for the cake, for my son, or for myself. But I knew this. Every illusion had to be thrown out like that cake. I sat at the table, pulled out my expense notebook, and turned to the old pages. $80,000 for the first divorce fees, $40,000 for the honeymoon, $200,000 for the Westport down payment, $12,000 a year for Maya and Owen's tuition, plus hundreds of thousands more for holidays, gifts, birthdays. I wrote the total, more than $1 million. Next to it, I added a small line, "Number of times you asked, 'Mom, are you okay?' 0. That wasn't just financial math. It was an indictment. Adrian, the boy who once held my hand through Central Park, who promised, 'I'll take care of you when I grow up,' now called only when he needed money. Tessa, the daughter-in-law who hugged me after the wedding and said, 'I'm so happy to have a mom like you,' now met me with a cold gaze, a smile on her lips but not in her eyes. At family dinners, I sat at the head of the table while they talked renovations, school choices, vacations, all paid with my money, yet no one asked my opinion. I'd become a decoration in their lives. My grandkids Maya, 13, and Owen, 11, were polite and well-mannered but distant, as if I were a guest. I suspect Tessa taught them that polite is enough. They'd say grandma and then go back to their phones. I don't blame them. Children reflect what adults teach. I used to think that as long as they were happy, it was fine if I took the loss. But that text was a wake-up call. "Mom, don't contact us anymore." I read it once, twice, 3 times. Each reading sent the pain in reverse from my heart to my throat, lodging there. In that moment, I understood. They didn't need me. They needed my money. And if they could sever things with a text, I had the right to sever back, not with words, but with action. I stood, went to the kitchen cabinet. In a small metal box under the drawer, I opened the lid. Inside was a mini recorder. Grant once gave me, "In case you ever need proof during negotiations." I placed it beneath the dining table. I knew sooner or later Adrian and Tessa would come back, not because they missed me, but because of money matters. And when they did, I would let the truth speak for itself. That night I brewed orange blossom tea and sat by the window looking down at the street. Below, headlights stretched on, horns blared, people rushed while I sat in an apartment once full of laughter, now hearing only the tick of a clock. Strangely, for the first time in years, I felt clear-headed. Not a wounded mother, but a woman waking from a long sleep called sacrifice. I looked at Grant's photo and whispered, "You once told me that if someone treats my kindness as a given, I must teach them the value of loss." I smiled. Maybe today is that day. I turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow of a half-melted birthday candle. Then I opened my notebook and wrote on a fresh page, "The Estelle plan starting today." If someone asked me, "What made you endure all those years?" I wouldn't answer right away. Because honestly, I didn't feel like I was enduring, at least not then. I thought I was giving, and in a widowed mother's heart, giving felt like the only way to feel needed. 10 years ago, after Grant passed, my world became too quiet. The Park Avenue apartment, white walls, polished wood floors once filled with the jazz he played every afternoon, now had only the hiss of the heater. At first, I couldn't stand the silence. I left the TV on all night, kept the hallway lights on, trying to fool myself someone was home. Then Adrian started stopping by more often. My only son tall, with his father's face, a warm voice. Each time he came, the apartment seemed to breathe again. He'd say, "Mom, I don't want you to be lonely. I just need to know you're okay." I believed it. While he talked, I'd pour tea, set out cookies, and feel myself calm. But gradually, those visits began with different openings. "Mom, I've got a little issue at the office." "Mom, my attorney says I need a retainer." "Mom, I'm house hunting, but Westport is expensive." Those moms made me feel useful. And in the emptiness of grief, being needed is a sedative. I wrote checks, made transfers, sent cash, paid bills not because I was forced, but because I believed love was continuing, just changing shape. I didn't realize the more I gave, the more I erased myself. The Park Avenue apartment where Grant and I lived more than 30 years sits along a boulevard washed in lights. Every corner holds a memory. There I cooked dinner, listened to Grant talk markets, risk and conviction. He always told me, "Money only matters when it's put in the right place, Estelle. Don't let it buy silence." I heard him then, but I didn't understand. Only when I compared it with the Westport house, where I paid nearly all the down payment, did I grasp what it means to buy silence. That house is beautiful, modern, with a wide yard and glass doors opening to a lawn smooth as silk. I remember the first day Adrian and Tessa took me to see it, both of them beaming like kids in a candy shop. "Mom, this is where our kids will grow up. This is our family's home." I smiled and signed a check for $200,000, never reading the small line below. The sponsor has no ownership rights. After that, every Sunday I drove nearly an hour from Manhattan to Westport for family dinner. I always brought Tessa's favorite dish, a bottle of wine from Grant's collection, and the hope that there'd be warmth there. But family dinner soon turned into a presentation. Adrian talked work. Tessa discussed redoing the kitchen, switching to Italian floors, repainting the living room. They called it upgrading the space. I knew better than anyone, upgrading with my money. They didn't ask what I wanted to eat. They just asked me to transfer funds before the contractors come this weekend. Each time, I smiled, nodded, and drove home in silence. I told myself, it's fine, as long as my son is happy. But the truth is, I no longer knew what happiness even meant. My attorney, Harold Benton, was the person Grant trusted most. He helped manage the trust, taxes, and investments. After Grant died, Harold checked in often with updates. "Mrs. Estelle," he once said, "I advise you to keep control. Don't let any expense become automatic." But I had Harold set up monthly transfers for Adrian, living costs, the kids' tuition, and even Tessa's credit cards. I said, "I just want them not to worry." Harold sighed but did it. Every month, numbers left my accounts automatically, and every month, the bond between me and my son left automatically too. In those 8 years, I helped Adrian save face more times than I can count. When he owed taxes, I wrote a check. When his car got towed for unpaid fees, I paid it. When he forgot Tessa's birthday, I booked the party. When they fought, I watched the kids so they could get a break. And through all those times, no one remembered my birthday. Year after year, late texts, or sometimes just an emoji. I told myself young people are busy, that I was asking too much. But there is a limit when you have to light your own birthday candle alone. Every excuse rings hollow. My friend Marjorie Hale, who lives 2 blocks away, once said over tea, "Estelle, giving without teaching is harm. You're not helping your son. You're making him believe you're a zero-interest bank." I laughed, sipped tea, and joked, "He's still my son, Marjorie. I can't just let him stumble." She looked at me, kind but firm, but if you always catch him, he'll never learn to stand. Back then, I thought she was too strict. Now I know she was right word for word. The warning signs started last year. Adrian visited less, though I'm only an hour away. Whenever I called, he answered shortly, "I'm in a meeting." Tessa stayed polite, but her gaze had changed. One evening, when I offered to help fix their pool, she smiled and said, "You don't need to worry, Mom. You should focus on your health. Maybe you should let financial professionals manage your assets so you can relax." Her voice was sweet enough that, if you didn't listen closely, it sounded caring. But I heard something else, a shady intent under the sugar. That night I opened my laptop and checked my bank accounts. Transfers steady, month after month. Money flowing out like water, and I had no idea how long I'd let the river run. I opened my notebook and began listing every gift from the last 8 years. Columns of numbers stretched on, nearly $2 million if I counted gifts, travel, and side investments. When I wrote the last line, my hand shook not from regret over money, but from seeing myself there, a woman who had erased herself with unconditional generosity. I sat very still. Only the clock ticked. I looked around the apartment, once full of laughter, now only Grant's smile in an oak frame. If he were alive, he wouldn't scold me, but he would ask, "Estelle, have you forgotten that kindness needs boundaries?" I touched the frame and answered in my heart, "Maybe I did forget, but I'll remember again, starting today." I closed the notebook, wiped my tears, then picked up my phone and opened contacts. Harold Benton's name lit up. I called, "Harold, I need to see you, as soon as possible." His voice was calm as ever. "What's going on, Mrs. Estelle?" I took a breath and spoke slowly, word by word. "I want to review everything. Every transfer, every authorization, every clause in the trust. I think it's time to turn the page." I hung up, stood, and made another cup of tea. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak sitting alone. I felt clear, and I knew, if my wallet used to be a symbol of love, from today it would be a symbol of boundaries. The next morning I went to Harold's Midtown office. That building marble lobby, a hint of Arabica in the air, was where Grant and I sat with him for years discussing investments. But today wasn't about stocks or returns. Today I came to take back control. Harold looked at me over half-rimmed glasses, speaking gently, "Are you sure, Estelle? Pausing the automatic transfers will trigger a lot of reactions." I smiled and set my teacup down. Reactions are exactly what I need. No one knows the value of water until it's shut off. I signed the document stopping all automatic payments, the Westport mortgage, tuition, Tessa's credit cards, even Adrian's living stipend. As of today, that stream would stop. Harold nodded slowly. "I've never seen you this resolute. Maybe because I finally understand love isn't measured by a bank balance." I left the office and stepped onto the street. Early March air, cold and dry, filled my lungs, and I felt strangely light. I didn't say a word to Adrian. No text, no email, no call. They never asked if I was okay. I didn't need to warn them. I was about to change. At first, everything was quiet. On the third day, my voicemail filled up. "Mom, I think there's a bank glitch." The mortgage bounced. "Mom, Tessa says her card was declined at the store." "Can you check?" "Mom, maybe I messed up the transfer. Could you call Harold?" I listened to all of it and said nothing. Outside, the sky stayed gray, but in my kitchen, the morning light warmed a white porcelain cup. For the first time in years, I didn't feel dragged by guilt. By the 6th day, Adrian's voice lost its calm. "Mom," I called Harold. He said it was on your instruction. "Mom, what's happening? Please, at least tell me why." His voice held confusion, anger, and something I hadn't heard in a long time, fear. I turned on the answering machine and let it record everything. I wanted to hear the shift in tone from certainty to unease to desperation. On the 7th day, exactly 7:30 a.m., M-spanned pounding hit my door. I checked the clock, straightened my cream cardigan, and put on the pearl necklace Grant gave me on our 25th anniversary. I didn't rush. I walked slowly to the door. Adrian stood there, gaunt face, crooked tie, eyes mixed with anger and worry. Tessa beside him, hair in a tight bun, beige fur coat, gripping a designer bag like she was holding her dignity together. I opened the door, my voice light as if they were visiting on a regular morning. "Good morning, you two. Come in." Adrian strode inside. Tessa followed, lips pressed thin. "Mom, what is going on?" "What do you mean, dear?" I said, calmly pouring coffee. "All the payments have stopped. The mortgage, credit cards, Maya's tuition, everything. The bank says the stop order came from you." "That's right," I said, setting the cup down evenly. "I need to review a few things." Tessa let out a cold laugh. "You can't just do that. That's our money." I turned and met her eyes. "Sorry, sweetheart, but no. It's money I earned, I manage, and I pay taxes on. You've been beneficiaries, not heirs." The room went heavy. I pulled out a chair, sat at the table, and opened my brown leather notebook full of neat entries. "Adrian," I said, "do you know how much I've transferred to your household over 8 years?" "Mom, I didn't count." "I did," I answered, flipping pages, my voice steady. "A total of $1,842,000. That includes tuition, housing, insurance, travel, holidays, birthdays. And that's just the documented amounts." I looked up at the two of them, frozen. "Now I want you to see another sheet." I slid a printed page from an envelope. "Number of visits to see me in 8 years, 32. Number of calls asking, 'Mom, are you okay?' 7. Number of calls asking for money, transfers, or complaining about expenses, 43. I set the paper down. The rustle sounded loud in the silent kitchen. "See?" I said quietly. "This scale has been tilted far too long." Adrian dropped into a chair, fingers in his hair. "Mom, I know. I've been careless. But you can't just cut us off like this. The house, the car, the kids' tuition, everything depends on that money." I looked at him, caught between pity and exhaustion. That's exactly why I had to stop. "If everything depends on me, you're not the man of your family," Tessa cut in sharp. "What about this month's mortgage, food, school, the car? How do you expect us to manage?" I stood, walked unhurriedly to the coffee machine. "The way millions of families do, Tessa. Live within your means. Adrian has a job. And you," I paused, turned, and smiled lightly, "you can get one." Tessa glared. She started to speak, then swallowed it. That answer seemed to choke her. I set 2 hot coffees on the table and sat across from them. "I'm not cutting you off, I'm pausing. And I have a proposal." Both looked up. I opened my notebook and pulled out a folded page. "For the next 30 days, I want you to prove I'm still family, not a walking wallet. Not with apologies or gifts, but with simple actions. Call because you want to know how I'm doing, invite me to dinner for no reason at all, or send a real card with no transfer request attached." Tessa let out a bitter laugh. "Are you turning love into a test, Mom?" I answered without blinking. "No. I just want to know if there's any love left to save." Adrian looked at his wife, then back at me. "Mom, I promise. We'll do better. I know I've forgotten what matters." I nodded. "I hope so, but remember, if I sense this is just acting, just a performance to get the money back, then everything ends for good. No more chances." Silence stretched on. Only the wall clock ticked off each beat. Then Tessa spoke, her voice low, no longer hard. "In the meantime, who pays the bills, Estelle?" I looked at her, my eyes softer but my tone firm. Someone who's spent for 8 years without earning a dollar can certainly learn to spend less for 30 days. "And Adrian?" I turned to my son. You have a job, a salary. It's time to live on your own steam. I stood, ending the conversation. 30 days. After that, I'll decide whether it's worth turning the money back on. They stood too, saying nothing. When the door closed behind them, I stayed seated, listening to their footsteps fade down the hall. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a strange quiet settle over the apartment, quiet like after you shut off a water valve and still hear the last little drips in the pipes. That was the sound of dependency dying and of a mother beginning to learn how to love herself. I didn't have to wait long for the play to begin. Only 3 days after that shut-off morning, the phone rang. Adrian's name lit up on the screen, along with a photo of him grinning beside his wife and kids, the picture I kept as my wallpaper for years but deleted long ago. I let it ring to the third chime before picking up. His voice was gentle, almost too gentle, like he was reading a rehearsed line. "Mom, I just wanted to check on you. You've been quiet lately. Are you eating enough?" I had to pause a few seconds not to laugh. My Adrian, the one who hadn't asked, "Mom, how are you?" in 3 years suddenly cared about my nutrition. I answered evenly, "I'm fine, thanks for asking." He paused, then continued, his tone almost too smooth. "I realize I've been awful. You've carried so much for us. I just want you to know I'm grateful." Someone who didn't know better might be moved. But I could hear paper rustling on his end, and Tessa's faint whisper behind him, prompting something. I spoke slowly, to let them believe I was softening. "I know, Adrian. Thank you. Take care of yourself." I hung up and checked the time. 37 minutes later, the phone rang again, this time a blocked number. A young voice came through, trembling slightly like recitation. "Hi, Grandma, it's Maya. I just wanted to tell you about my day at school." I leaned back and listened as my granddaughter talked nonstop about math class, a new teacher, a science project. Every detail was too perfect, too polished, like a carefully assigned script. I let her finish, then asked gently, "Maya, who told you to call Grandma?" A brief silence, then her voice dropped. "Dad said you were sad. Mom said to call so you'd know the family still loves you." I sighed softly. "I understand." "Maya, listen. I'll always be your grandma. Do you hear me? Whether the adults are upset or not, that never changes." "Yes. Do you want to keep talking or do you have homework to do?" I have homework." "Then go study, sweetheart. I love you." "I love you too." I hung up, my heart sinking. I wasn't angry at Maya, only tender toward her. A child being pulled into a grown-up performance with her own clear little voice. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. The delivery guy stood outside, arms full of white lilies and pale pink roses so big he had to angle them through the doorway. A card tied with silver ribbon read, "Thinking of Mom with all my love. Tessa." I set the bouquet on the table, its sweetness almost choking. I remembered that even on my birthday, this woman had never sent flowers, never even called. Now that the money was shut off, she suddenly remembered motherly love. I snapped a photo of the bouquet, sent it to Harold with a note. "First signal. They've started performing." 2 days later, Tessa called. Her voice was bright, tinged with a shy friendliness, like she was trying to bond. "Mom, I know it's a busy week, but I'd love to take you out for a girls' day. Spa, nails, a little shopping, what do you think?" I smiled lightly. The same person who once mocked my dress as outdated in front of her friends now wanted a girls' day? "Sounds lovely, Tessa, but I'm a bit tied up this week." "I'll check my calendar." "Okay, take your time. I just want us to be closer. I've been thinking a lot." Her voice trailed off, then the line clicked. I watched the afternoon light filter through the vase on the table, lily petals making soft halos. Beautiful, yes, but beauty with a price tag. And I knew with Tessa, everything had a price, even affection. On the 8th day, the post office delivered a pale blue envelope. The scrawled line read, "To Grandma Estelle from Owen." Inside was a handwritten note. The penmanship was even careful, spotless, oddly so, unlike the hurried scrawl I'd seen from him on Christmas cards. "Grandma, I think you're wonderful. I'm sorry I don't say it more. I hope to see you soon. You're the best grandma in the world. I love you. Owen." I read it again and again, studying the strokes. Every letter was overly sculpted, the lines too straight, as if someone had guided his hand until it was perfect. It made me smile and ache at the same time. That evening I called Adrian. He picked up fast, hope in his voice. "Mom, I knew you'd call. I'm guessing the flowers moved you, right?" "The flowers are lovely, and Owen's letter is sweet," I said slowly. "But both smell of staging." "Mom, what are you saying?" "Adrian, listen to me clearly. If you truly want to repair this, start with honesty. Don't use the kids as tools to ask for money. Don't hand them scripts to read. I've lived long enough to hear the difference between truth and performance, silence on the other end. I could picture him glancing at Tessa, signaling her to be quiet, afraid I might hear something. "There's just one thing I want you to remember," I added, softer. "If these 30 days are real, I'll know. If they're just a show, I'll know that too. And then this door will close for good." I hung up before he could answer. Late at night, I brewed orange blossom tea and sat in the dining room, the warm lamp casting gold over the wood table. I reached under the table to the tiny recorder I'd stuck there last week. A small green light blinked, still powered, still working. I slipped on headphones and replayed the morning they came over. Tessa's sharp voice, "That's our money." Adrian's sigh, "Mom, at least tell me. What's going on?" Then, me steady, calm. Hearing myself, I felt no regret. I opened a new audio file, the calls from today. Every tone, every breath, every awkward pause from my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandkids captured. Part of me felt sad. I once dreamed our family would keep warm memories, not cold audio files. But another part knew, this is the truth. And truth, even when cold, deserves to be kept more than sweet lies do. Have you ever had to smile through a play you never signed up to watch? If you have, leave a line, just one line. I want to know how closely you recognize that feeling. I set the headphones down, turned off the lights, leaving only the small glow over the stove. Outside, New York slipped into spring rain, cars slicing through puddles. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain mingle with the even hum of the recorder. I thought of Grant and what he once said, "Never confuse love with bribery. Once people know you fear loneliness, they'll turn it into a weapon." I smiled. Grant was right. But maybe this time, the weapon is in my hands. The next day, I woke early. Thin sunlight slid through the curtains. I set the kettle on, opened my laptop, and backed up every recording to a separate drive. Folder name, Opening Act. I knew this was just the first scene. And the writer this time wasn't Adrian or Tessa, it was me. Marjorie's text arrived at midday as I finished brewing tea and rearranging the lilies that had begun to droop. My old friend never minced words. "Estelle, I was at the country club yesterday." Tessa sat with the tennis ladies. She spoke softly but just loud enough for the whole table. "My mother-in-law's been odd lately, impulsive spending, not stable since her husband died. We might have to bring in an expert to assess capacity." I froze, the flower stem slipping in my hand. A petal snapped against the crystal with a click. Marjorie lowered her voice. "I'm not telling you to hurt you, but you need to know they're laying the road for a different script." "Thank you," I said. Two small words felt like stones in a dry throat. I hung up and stood still for a long moment, listening to the clock beat against the wall. In my head, the pieces clicked into place, flowers, the handwritten note, the check-in calls. Then the club whispers one side, painting the picture of devoted children trying to care, the other casting me as the erratic widow, difficult, with strange spending. If people heard only half the story, they'd side with the dutiful child. I dialed Harold Benton. He picked up almost instantly. "Harold, answer me honestly. Has anyone at all called your office asking about my financial capacity or mental competency?" A beat of silence. I heard him set his glasses down. "Estelle, I shouldn't disclose informal inquiries. But since you asked," Adrian called. "He said you'd made a few unusual financial decisions. Asked about capacity evaluations and guardianship mechanisms and what the first steps would be." The floor seemed to tilt under me. Strangely, instead of breaking, everything inside me went still. "What did you tell him, Harold?" "I said you are fully lucid and that any move to limit your capacity would waste time and money and could backfire in court. I also told him if he truly cares, he should start by checking on his mother." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady again. "We have more work to do." I hung up and looked down at the busy avenue. The first sharp pain sealed like a cut under a clean bandage. It was clear now. The pricey bouquet, the painstaking note, the gentle calls were props. They were building a backdrop. We care so much. While up close, they shoved me into the role of unstable mother. I poured more tea. The steam fogged the glass. In that haze, I saw my reflection no longer trembling. If they wanted to play on the legal field, that's exactly where I'd meet them. That afternoon, I called Dr. Lila Khan's office, the neurocognitive specialist Harold once mentioned. The assistant asked a few screening questions. The earliest slot was next Wednesday, a half-day comprehensive assessment. Memory, attention, executive function, plus a clinical interview. "We'll send an official appointment letter and the documents to bring." "Thank you," I added, clearly on purpose. The results must be stamped and suitable for court filings. I hung up, marked the date in red, and wrote beneath it, "Calm is the first piece of proof." That evening, I called Maya. It rang a long time. I guessed she was deep in homework. Finally, a young voice. "Grandma? Finished studying, Maya?" Almost." I paused a second, then chose the gentlest way to say it. "I want you to know this. The grown-ups have grown-up problems. You don't need to call Grandma as a duty. Call if you want to or don't. I'll always be Grandma, and you'll always be my grandchild. No one gets to use that bond to scare you." Silence, then a little sigh of relief. "I understand, Grandma. Go study. If you want this weekend, I'll take you to the New York Public Library. The picture reading room is beautiful." "Yes." Her voice suddenly brightened. I texted Owen a short line. "Don't worry about Grandma. Study well, play ball safely. I can take care of myself." He sent back a basketball and a heart simple, more honest than any letter. That night I opened my brown leather journal and started a meticulous log. Time, place, what was said, who said what, in what tone, which bouquet arrived, what the card said. I even copied Marjorie's text verbatim. I taped the flower delivery receipt to the page with clear tape. Each page a puzzle piece, building a rebuttal file I could carry into any hearing. I printed an 8-year summary, total transfers, real check-ins, number of money requests, all numbered, dated, matched with statements. I added notes on the birthdays they forgot not to play the victim, but to contextualize behavior. I stacked everything into a red envelope, the color I use for documents no one gets to pretend they didn't see. The next morning I called Adrian. "Next Friday night I want dinner with the whole family. No occasion, just family dinner." He hesitated. "Mom, we'd love that. At the Westport house?" "Good. And I have a few things to say after dessert. Please invite 2 of my friends. They're older, kind. Seat them at the end of the table." "Which friends?" The ones you met at your father's funeral, Jacob Stein, retired from Wexler, and Dr. Naomi Chu, a family therapist. They're coming for dinner, just dinner. I heard him swallow. Okay, I'll arrange it. I hung up. The independent third parties weren't to threaten anyone. Their presence alone would be enough as silent witnesses for a night that needed clarity. While waiting for Dr. Khan's appointment, my phone kept buzzing. Apologies soft as velvet, tidy check-ins, offers to take you to the park, to lunch. I picked the gentlest invitations to keep the 30-day rhythm enough to lengthen the rope, enough to thicken the mask. Each night I checked the chip under the table, exported files, and labeled them by date and content. Tessa Flowers card, Adrian apology dinner. I didn't replay them to torture myself. I saved them to spare future arguments. As Americans say, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. For me, if it isn't recorded, it will be retold differently. On the day, I arrived at Dr. Lila Khan's clinic. Bright waiting room, the faint smell of freshly sharpened pencils. She appeared with a neat silver cut and clear, kind eyes. The evaluation ran for hours. Digit spans, block designs, rule switching, reading comprehension interpretation. Midway, she offered tea. Are you stressed, Estelle? I feel oddly calm, I said honestly. Maybe because for the first time, I don't need to prove I'm a good mother. I just need to prove I'm lucid. She smiled and finished the last task. I left with a pickup date for results, the center's blue stamp shining. On the sidewalk, the sky felt like an open door. No rumor could declare me unstable anymore. In the afternoon, I stopped by the small church on Madison, sat in the back, and didn't ask for anything grand. I just told Grant in my heart, I'm doing the right thing. When I stepped out, sunlight shattered across the red brick, quiet, proud. That evening, I called Marjorie and described the dinner plan. She chuckled. I'll wear the wine-colored coat. Need me to say anything? I just need you to sit, breathe, and watch. Sometimes that's enough. In the days that followed, I finalized a timeline. Who called when, whether I answered, the main point of each exchange. I printed 3 copies, one for me, one for Harold, one sealed in the safe. The night before dinner, I stood in my kitchen and looked around. The home was quiet but not sad. White porcelain cups, fresh flowers, the table runner Grant loved. I placed 2 things in my handbag. Dr. Khan's evaluation signed and stamped, and my 8-year summary. Not to flaunt, just so that if anyone chose to forget, the papers would remember for me. I rested my hand on the bag and felt my heartbeat steady. Strangely, I wasn't nervous. Tomorrow night wasn't a trial or a stage. It was just family dinner. But I knew that at that dinner, the truth would sit in the center of the table like a main course no one could ignore. I turned off the stove and drew the curtains. Outside, New York roared. Inside, I touched the pearls at my neck and heard Grant's voice like a breeze. Don't let money buy silence, Estelle. I smiled. Not this time. Because tomorrow, I would 5. Speak with documents, with numbers, with the calmest voice I have. And when all the rumors fall away, only one thing will stand. I know who I am. 3 days after I received Dr. Lila Khan's evaluation, Harold called back, I know someone you can trust. No flash, tight as a locked lake. Name's Quinn Park private investigator. He helped Grant in that Manhattan asset dispute back in 2011. I remembered that case. Grant once said, Quinn has the brain of an accountant and the instincts of a cop. I nodded, though Harold couldn't see me. Give him my number. 2 days later, right at 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. A man in his mid-40s, tall, lean, charcoal coat spoke in a low, even voice. He showed his license, then said, Mrs. Estelle, I know this needs to be quiet. No one besides you and Mr. Benton should know I exist. I nodded and poured black coffee. "What do you need from me, Mr. Park?" "Only three things: old statements, transaction, emails with the bank, and temporary access to the trust account. I'll find the rest." I set a thick envelope on the table, everything ready. I want to know where the money I sent Adrian went. Every dollar. "And if there are outsiders involved, I want names." Quinn's mouth twitched. A cool light flashed behind his glasses. "I'll dig. But prepare yourself when money's involved. People rarely stop at ungrateful." 7 days later, he came back. The Park Avenue kitchen was bright with early spring light, but when Quinn opened his laptop, the gray-blue screen glinted colder than any metal. "Here's their financial picture, Mrs. Estelle." First line, 7 credit cards, total balance, $148,000. Next, a second mortgage on the Westport house, $320,000. And a string of late payments from the kids' private school. I stayed quiet, staring at the numbers like a house whose walls were slowly cracking. "Worse," Quinn said. "They set up an intermediary account, call it a buffer account. It's registered to Tessa, but the primary recipient is Adrian." He zoomed in on a cash flow chart. Each month, the transfers I made to the family trust were split 80% to the main account, 20% to the buffer account. From there, the money cycled, paying down a slice of debt, then moving back, creating the illusion of a clean, transparent flow. "A soft way to launder movement," Quinn said. "Perfectly legal on paper and convincing enough to make outsiders think every expense is on the level." I leaned back, a chill running along my spine. How long have they been doing this? At least 2.5 years. I also found their private sessions with a separate financial advisor, named Merrill Stone, Family Asset Management. Meetings are scheduled on Tuesdays, often right after your monthly transfers. Quinn took a sip of coffee, then spoke slowly, like reciting a confession for someone else. "Then comes the worst part." He opened another folder labeled Social Witnesses. "They're building a social file on you. Neighbors saying, 'You forget things', club staff claiming you talk to yourself in the locker room, a yoga coach saying you lose focus during meditation. All logged with email confirmations between Tessa and an attorney named Robert Kane." My breathing grew heavy, not from shock, but from realizing every tiny quirk and petty rumor had been weaponized on purpose. "They need social proof to bolster a guardianship case," Quinn explained. "On paper, they're dutiful children caring for a mother who's slipping out of control." I asked, my voice rough. "Since when did they start thinking about this?" Quinn rotated the screen, extracted emails with a timeline. "Right after Mr. Grant's funeral, I have a memo from Kane to Adrian. The emotional period following loss is an appropriate time to initiate a soft guardianship plan." Those 4 words, soft guardianship plan, made me want to laugh. Polished language for legalized theft. Quinn went on. "I also found a parallel legal advice schedule with Merrill. They discussed getting familiar with the local judge and building goodwill with the Westport community. For 5 years, they've been stockpiling good witnesses by donating to the school fund, attending galas, and telling the story of a mother-in-law unbalanced by loneliness." I was silent for a long time. Outside, a siren wailed and thinned into the air. "And you're certain this data is accurate?" "I have copies of emails, appointments, transfer statements, even Kane's internal notes I recovered from an archive account. Everything is encrypted and backed up to a separate drive." I nodded slightly. "Good. Print 2 sets. One for you, one for me." Quinn looked at me a bit surprised. "You don't want me to keep monitoring?" "No need. I don't need more proof to understand people. I just need enough to lay on the table when they say, 'for Mom's sake.'" That afternoon, I sat in my study printing everything. The steady whir of the printer sounded like someone's heartbeat counting down. I organized it all. Cash flow charts, list of buffer accounts, emails about guardianship, Attorney Kane's transaction logs, notes from Merrill Stone, I clipped each set, labeled them in red, and slid them into a red envelope the color Grant always said was only for truths no one can deny. I sealed it and placed it in the safe beside Dr. Lila Khan's report. Dr. Khan did not disappoint. In the cover letter, she'd added a handwritten line, "No signs of cognitive decline. Mrs. Estelle is fully lucid. Reasoning, memory, and emotional regulation are strong. Any contrary claims lack medical basis." I read that line again, and again, not to reassure myself, but because it sounded like music that finally loosened a knot. Those 10 lines weighed more than all the money Adrian and Tessa ever demanded. I leaned back. Late sun striped through the blinds onto the pearls at my throat, flashing like Grant's reminder, "Don't let anyone retell your story the way they want." Quinn called again that evening. Voice even, "Mrs. Estelle, I'm sending the backup on an encrypted drive. Password is your and Mr. Grant's wedding date. I'll keep a second backup in secure storage. Only you or Mr. Benton can access it." "Thank you, Quinn. What do you plan to do next?" I looked out the window at New York, glittering like a sea of indifferent lights. "Nothing yet," I said slowly. "Only when they believe I've bitten the bait does the final move really land." He paused, then spoke softly. "Mrs. Estelle, you're not just lucid, you're formidable." I smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not chasing victory. I'm reclaiming fairness, the thing they forgot how to define." That night, I reopened the opening act folder and added a new one, Hidden Flows Financial Evidence. 2 folders, 2 stories. One about feelings, one about figures. Together they formed the full portrait of betrayal by people I used to call family. I closed the laptop and switched off the light. Street glow poured through the window, falling on the red envelope on my desk, its shadow on the wall like a seal over a secret now complete. I touched it lightly, a thin smile rising. Now I have enough ammunition. No shouting, no noisy revenge, just one evening and one line at the right moment, and everything will cave in. Day 29. A damp, pale New York morning. I was making tea when the phone rang. Adrian's name. I hesitated a few seconds, then answered. "Mom," his voice caught. "I'm sorry. I've thought a lot these past weeks. You're right, we were wrong." I said nothing. I could hear shaky breathing. Then Tessa's voice, strangely soft. "Mom, I know I've been disrespectful. I was afraid you'd be sad, so I acted foolishly. I want to start over, truly, Mom. If I hadn't had recordings and an investigation file, I might have cried. But now every word of that apology sounded like lines read smooth at a final rehearsal." I only said, "Thank you both. This Friday I want to meet the whole family. Dinner, Westport." A brief pause, then Adrian rushed in. "Of course, Mom. We'll make it happen." I set the phone down and sipped my tea. The orange blossom was still sweet, but it couldn't mask the cold steel spreading in my chest. The board was set. All that remained was the last move. That afternoon, I video called Maya and Owen. They were in the study room, shelves behind them stacked with picture books and little science models. I smiled, voice easy, like nothing big was coming. "I'm coming for dinner this weekend. But I want to tell you both something. No matter what happens, remember Grandma loves you unconditionally. The grown-up stuff I'll handle. You just keep studying and being kind. Deal?" Owen nodded. Maya asked softly, "Will you be okay, Grandma?" "I used to be fragile," I said, "but not anymore. Just remember, kindness isn't the same as silence." I ended the call feeling lighter. Kids shouldn't watch a battlefield, but I want them to know the truth is never something to be ashamed of. That evening, I called Harold Benton. "Friday, 7 p.m. I need you on standby. If I signal, FaceTime in and confirm live legal witnessing." "Understood, Estelle. I'll have the Westport deed and the trust documents ready. Everything is in your name. Good. Test the connection beforehand." I hung up and looked at the red envelope on the table. Inside, along with Quinn Park's report, were copies of Dr. Lila Khan's evaluation and the timeline I built. Transfer dates. Dates they called. Dates the unstable mother rumor spread, and the first day they mentioned guardianship. All arranged like a score of betrayal. One I, and no one else, would play for them. The last 2 days I was busier than I'd been in years. Not planning payback, but putting my life back in order. I went to Harold's office and signed the new will. "Are you sure, Estelle?" he asked, voice low. "Very sure," I said, crisp. The entire estate house, stocks, investment funds, savings, totaling roughly $50 million, will go to the Grant Estelle Foundation for scholarships and community health. My husband's name will live there with mine, not in the hearts of people who see him as a checkbook. Harold nodded, eyes a little wet. "He'd be proud of you." I smiled. "I'm not doing it to make him proud. I'm doing it so I can be at peace." Day 30, Friday morning. I rose early, took the red envelope out of the safe, and slipped it into my small handbag. Before leaving, I opened the kitchen drawer and checked the mini recorder hidden under the liner. The light blinked green. Full battery. I called my locksmith on Madison. "Can we schedule tomorrow morning? Replace all locks at the Westport house. Front, back, garage." "I'll be there for paperwork." "Yes, 8 a.m., ma'am." I hung up, feeling strangely light. No matter how dinner went, tomorrow I'd have the keys. At lunch, I stopped by a small spot on Lexington for the onion soup Grant loved. In the back booth, I flipped through the copies again. Westport title held by the Grant Estelle Family Trust. Trustee, Estelle K. Grant. Temporary eviction packet already signed, one confirmation away. Attorney Kane's email to Tessa using the line, "Once the mother-in-law is deemed incapacitated, the trust assets can be redistributed." I snapped a photo of that printout and sent it to Harold with a note. "This is the line they didn't manage to delete." Harold replied, short and calm, "Stay steady. You hold every legal advantage. They can't touch a single brick." I put my phone away and looked up. The sun had come out. Light bounced off the metal tabletop, and I remembered what Grant used to say. Sometimes the win isn't in striking back. It's in being prepared so thoroughly you can't be knocked down. I smiled. He'd like how I'm playing this one. In the afternoon, I called my 2 older friends, Jacob Stein and Naomi Chu. Jacob's a retired attorney who knows guardianship law inside out. Naomi's a therapist who's seen too many cases of family abuse. "I need you both at dinner in Westport tonight," I said. "You don't have to speak, just sit at the end of the table. Observe. If you see me look over and nod, Jacob, you'll FaceTime Harold. Naomi, you'll note demeanor and conduct as an informal social assessment. I need witnesses." Jacob was thoughtful. "Estelle, are you sure? This won't stay a small family matter." "I'm sure. They turned my name into gossip. I'll turn the truth into a verdict." Naomi smiled over the phone, voice soft as air. "You don't need to shout, Estelle. Truth has its own volume." I spent the rest of the afternoon writing a short note, not a will, just a last page to myself. If anyone asks why I didn't forgive, I'll say this. Forgiveness isn't erasing the offense, it's ending the offender's control. I don't need my son punished. I need him to see the cost of greed. I folded the note, tucked it into my journal, and closed it. At sunset, I put on my navy coat and the pearls Grant gave me and looked in the mirror. No tears. Just a 67-year-old woman walking into the final match of her life with the calm that only experience and pain can forge. Before I left, I checked my bag. Recorder. New will. Evidence timeline. Quinn Park's LUG. Investigative file. Dr. Lila Khan's report. And my phone with FaceTime set to Harold Benton at the top. I inhaled, turned off the lights, and locked the door. Outside, New York was lighting up. Cars glittered, Crowds hurried by. No one knew that in a suburb an hour away, a family dinner would become a mother's quiet presentation of justice. I stepped out and called a car. Streetlights washed over my face in the rearview mirror, reflecting my steady eyes. No anger, no tears, only purposeful quiet, the quiet of someone holding the final move. I reached Westport half an hour early. The two-story house they'd bought mostly with my money now looked like a spread in a design magazine. Crystal chandelier, starched white linens, a vase of Dutch tulips centered on the dining table. They'd prepared well not to welcome a mother, but to stage a perfect family reunion. Tessa met me at the door, a trace of expensive perfume. She tilted her head, a thin smile, syrupy voice. "You're early, Mom. I wanted to surprise you." I answered lightly. "At my age, I'm done with surprises. I prefer the truth." The housekeeper, the only truly neutral person there, hung my coat quickly. On the table, candles burned. The dishes were the fine china saved for special occasions. I sat, feeling the room glow like a set. Adrian came out of the kitchen with a tray of wine, trying to seem natural. "Red for you, Mom? I remember you like Bordeaux." I smiled faintly. "Right. Grant always bought it for our anniversaries." Tessa jumped in to keep the scene moving. "I remember you said this black dress makes you look more elegant than anything else." "I'm so glad you wore it tonight." I looked at her and smoothed the fabric. It was the dress I wore to Grant's funeral. "Yes, it sent your father off. I'm wearing it again to send off another part of my life." The table stilled. I sipped. The tannins grazed my tongue, bitter, clarifying. The main course passed under a pretend, cheerful hush. "Weather talk? The neighborhood? Any travel plans, Mom?" Each question arranged like a choir. After dessert lemon cake with frosting, the kind Tessa knows I like, I set down my fork, dabbed my mouth, and stood. Candlelight slid over the black dress, glinting off the table. "Now," I said, each word clear, "it's my turn." Tessa smiled tight. "Oh, a speech? Wonderful, everyone." I raised a hand and cut in. "I won't be long, but I want you to hear me out." I placed a red envelope in the middle of the table. Tessa blinked. Adrian frowned. "This," I said, "is the cognitive and capacity evaluation from Dr. Lila Khan, a specialist recognized by federal courts. Conclusion: Mrs. Estelle is fully lucid, with complete capacity to manage finances and make legal decisions." No one spoke. I continued, "And this," I set down another stack, "is the buffer account statements, guardianship planning schedule, and the list of people you contacted to build social witnesses." I spoke slowly, evenly, without raising my voice. They all signed, and each believed they were helping a family care for a mother losing control. I've heard every call, read every email. "I know you started this right after Grant's funeral." Adrian sprang up. "Mom, I don't understand what you're talking about." I met his eyes. "You do. Because you discussed a soft guardianship plan with Attorney Kane. And Tessa, you emailed advisor Meryl Stone about preparing a lawful guardianship approach when Mom shows instability. I have the originals." Tessa went pale, voice shaking. Who made this up?" "This is a misunderstanding. We were only trying to protect you." I pulled out my phone and hit speaker. Harold Benton's voice came through, clear and cool. "This is Harold Benton, counsel to Mrs. Estelle Grant. Under Connecticut law, any deliberate fabrication of evidence to secure control over the assets of a competent adult constitutes legal fraud. Additionally, using an elderly person's assets without authorization is financial elder abuse, subject to criminal prosecution." Tessa went pale, lips pressed tight. Adrian stood frozen. I gently set the phone down. "Thank you, Harold. I'll call you back." Then I turned to them, my voice calm. "If you still think this is a misunderstanding, listen to this. I took a small recorder from my handbag and pressed play. Adrian's voice rang out clear, echoing through the quiet dining room. "Just sign it, Mom won't understand. If we wait, she might change her mind. Doing it on her birthday makes the most sense, she'll be soft." Then Tessa's voice, "Don't forget the trust if we don't get control of those assets soon. It'll be too late." A soft gasp came from the head of the table. "Maya." She set her spoon down, eyes wide, lips trembling. "Dad, Mom, why?" Owen's face went rigid as he stared at his parents like they were strangers. I stopped the recorder and looked down at the two of them. "Kids, the grown-up stuff isn't yours to carry. I know none of this is your fault. Remember, real love never needs to be hidden." I squeezed Maya's hand, then turned back to Adrian and Tessa. My voice stayed even, no shaking, no anger. In front of my grandchildren, I won't lower myself by yelling. But I do have a duty to spell out the consequences. I took out another thin file and set it on the table. These are the legal papers for the Westport house. The entire property belongs to the Grant Estelle Family Trust. I'm the trustee. You are guests, nothing more. The eviction packet is signed. The lawful move-out deadline is 14 days. Adrian stepped back, face drained. "You can't do this. This is my house." "No," I said softly. "This is the house of the woman you used to call Mom, the one who paid for everything, from your wedding to your children's tuition. Starting today, that mother stops being a bank." Tessa broke down, sobbing, trying to grab my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was scared of losing everything. I didn't know it would go this far." I pulled my hand back and looked at her. Not angry anymore, just tired. "Tessa, if you were truly afraid of losing, you should have learned how to keep. But you didn't keep trust, and that's the one thing money can't buy back." The room fell dead silent. Only the small crackle of candle wicks and the wall clock counting seconds remained. I glanced at Jacob and Naomi, my two friends at the end of the table. They said nothing, just gave the slightest nod. I knew everything had been recorded, in full. I gathered the documents and put them in my bag. Before standing, I looked around the table and softened my voice. "I don't need you to be punished. I need you to understand that. Every action has a price. If you want to start over, live on your own 2 feet. If you choose the old path, then the law will teach you the rest." I paused, letting my eyes rest on Maya and Owen once more. "You two, Grandma will still be here if one day you need a place to come home to. Just not today." Then I turned and walked away without looking back. Outside, the Westport night air tasted faintly of salt. I stepped out feeling like I had closed a long chapter. Behind me, I heard Tessa's sobs and Adrian calling out, "Mom, please!" But I didn't stop. Moonlight spilled across the stone path, throwing a long, steady shadow of me. I knew they would never forget the image of the woman in a black dress walking out of the house that had been their symbol, red envelope in hand, head held high. And I knew that from that moment, I'd taken back my name, Estelle Grant. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. New York was cold and dry. Winter light slanted through the crater. Blinds. I made tea, opened the window, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like a void. It felt like space to be free. I'd spent the night writing the final lines in the packet for Harold not to hurt Adrian and Tessa, but to close a phase I'd enabled for too long. That afternoon, I drove back to Westport alone. The gates stood open. No laughter, no perfume like the night before, just silence heavy and hollow. Adrian and Tessa sat on the sofa, faces drawn. I didn't circle around it. "I'm here to make things clear." I set the file on the table, my voice steady, not shaking. "Under the trust terms, you have 30 days to vacate the Westport house. This isn't punishment. It's putting everyone back in the right place. This home belongs to the Grant Estelle Family Trust, created to serve community funds and medical research, not something for anyone to cling to. Adrian lowered his head, hands clenched. Mom, we know we fought. We're wrong. But the kids, their school. I nodded slightly. I've accounted for that. I'll support Maya and Owen's tuition paid directly to the school. Not through the parents. Their education won't be disrupted. But that's for them, not for you. Tessa looked up, eyes red. Are you throwing our whole family out? We have nowhere else. No, I said, still gentle but firm. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you 30 days to stand on your own feet. I pulled 2 envelopes from my bag. These are career counselors Harold arranged. One specializes in re-entry for women who've been out of the workforce, Tessa. Contact her. And this is a list of open project management roles around Stamford that fit Adrian's background. You can both start over if you're willing to relearn how to work. Tessa's voice shook. You don't understand, we were just trying to help you, so you wouldn't be tricked by others. I gave a fawn. Small, wry smile, no bitterness, only the sour truth. Help? By pushing guardianship papers? By hiring people to spin a story that I'm out of control? Listen, help is a right to give, not a tribute you're entitled to collect. I've let you forget that for too long. The room sank back into silence. Only the clock ticked, as if measuring out the beats of my patience. I opened another file and set it down. This is my new will. I'm saying it now to avoid any misunderstanding later. The entire estate house, stocks, savings, investment funds, totaling $50 million will go to education, healthcare, and scholarship funds under the Grant Foundation. Your father's legacy and mine will serve those who truly need help, not those planning to take it. Adrian lifted his head, eyes shining. Mom, you're not leaving anything to me? I looked at my son, the baby I held when he was only hours old, the boy I soothed in the dark, the man whose early debts I paid, and said quietly, I'm leaving you more than money. I'm leaving you the chance to start over. If you use it, that's the greatest inheritance I can give. Tears rolled down Adrian's face, but I knew it wasn't just loss, it was the first time in his life he'd be responsible for himself. I turned to the study table where Maya and Owen sat silent. They didn't speak, but I saw fear in their eyes, the kind kids feel when they realize adults aren't perfect. I went over and sat at their level. Kids, Grandma has a little gift just for you. I took out 2 small envelopes. Inside are a letter from me, city library cards, and a list of free community activities, places I'd like you to try this summer. You'll meet people who teach by doing, not by talking. Maya looked at me and whispered, Grandma, you won't be mad at my mom and dad, right? No, I'm not mad. But I won't hide the truth anymore. Adults have to relearn how to live. Right, and you just keep learning to be kind. I hugged them both lightly, felt their quick breaths against my shoulder. Then I stood and faced Adrian. Son, hear me one last time. You can lose my money, but don't lose being a father. The kids need a guide, not an excuse maker. They don't need wealth, they need example. Start there. Adrian bowed his head, hands over his face. Tessa sat in silence. I looked around the room one last time. Everything was in place, the beige sofa, the wedding photo, the slightly crooked oil painting, but the warmth of family was gone. I'll have someone inspect the house after you move out. Don't worry, I'm not taking back anything except the truth. Tessa burst into tears, her sobs cracking the air. Mom, do you think you could ever forgive me? I answered slowly, without dodging it. Forgiveness, Tessa, doesn't mean going back. Forgiveness is when I no longer let pain run my life. If you truly regret, show it with actions. She nodded and covered her face. Adrian stared out the window at the bare winter maples. I walked to the door. The cold air bit my skin, but I could breathe. Before leaving, I turned back. Harold will reach out to guide you through the move-out process. And don't think about lawsuits or spreading rumors every piece of evidence is saved. With one call, I'll file criminal charges. No one answered. I knew they understood. I stepped down the porch. Thin sunlight hit the pavers. The breeze carried a far-off salt smell. I got in the car but didn't start it yet. I looked in the rearview mirror. The door closed behind me, quiet. Inside, they were probably crying, falling apart, but to me, it wasn't the sound of pain anymore. It was the sound of illusions cracking. Merging onto the highway, I saw the sign, New York 60 miles. I let out a small laugh. 60 miles, but the distance between a mother once exploited and a woman now free. I touched the pearls Grant gave me and whispered, "Do you see, love?" I finally did it. No hatred, no selling my soul, just letting go at the right time. Headlights ahead strung together like stars. Peace settled in my chest. No more begging calls, no more demanding texts, no more staged family dinners, just a little jazz and an open road. From now on, if anyone asks, "Mrs. Estelle, do you have regrets?" I'll smile and say, "No. I only regret not doing this sooner." I lowered the window and let the wind wash over my face, clean and bright. Behind me, Westport faded into dusk. Ahead, the city lit up, and I, Estelle Grant, was truly free for the first time in years. A week after the dessert night, Westport felt like someone had flipped a switch to quiet. But at the country club, the wood-floored corridor still buzzed. I didn't go. I only needed Marjorie. She called me Tuesday afternoon, gleeful like she'd just watched a final curtain drop. "Estelle, you didn't have to do a thing." Dr. Khan's evaluation accidentally landed in the club's shared inbox official copy, seal, and wet signature. Anyone who whispered unstable got shut down on the spot. They changed the topic faster than swapping tennis shoes. I laughed, not a victory laugh, a relieved one. When the truth comes with documents, it walks itself where it needs to go. I just said, "Thank you, Marjorie," and poured more tea. Late sunlight slipped through the blinds, painting pale gold rectangles on the wall. That evening, I signed a stack of letters Harold drafted to the social witnesses, the yoga coach, the event coordinator, a few gym acquaintances. Each letter was polite and direct, reminding them that repeating false claims about someone's mental capacity can be defamation. That adding a line at someone's urging to support a fraudulent guardianship could be aiding and abetting. No insults, no heat, just statute names, section numbers, and Harold Benton's firm signature. Thursday morning, Harold called. "Eviction complete." The locksmith changed the locks at 7:30 a.m. The inventory log is signed by witnesses. Adrian and Tessa's belongings are sealed and moved to storage for a month per regulations. You don't need to appear. I stood at the window, watching a thin cloud cut across the sky. Strange how, when the boundary is clear, your mind feels rinsed clean. That night, I opened the first transfer files for the Estelle and Grant Foundation, seed money, and a 10-year funding plan for 3 tracks: secondary and college scholarships, community clinics, and programs to prevent financial abuse of the elderly. I signed with a steady hand even I didn't expect. Grant used to say, "Money is like water. Either you let it stagnate or you channel it where people need the cool." I chose the latter. The next day, I stopped by Dr. Lila Khan's clinic just to say thank you even though I knew she was busy. The waiting room still smelled faintly of freshly sharpened pencils. Dr. Khan shook my hand, eyes sharp yet kind. "I only did my job, Mrs. Estelle." "You did more," I said. "You handed me a mirror to see myself clearly." She smiled. "Boundaries are vitamins for a late-blooming mind. Once you set them, your brain stops burning energy on fear and uses it for clarity." I carried that line home like a mint under my tongue. Cool, clean, steady. The last piece was Maya and Owen. I wouldn't let them become couriers for adult emotion. I booked a schedule with family therapist Dr. Naomi Chu, fixed calls every Sunday at 5 p.m., routed through her office. There, every conversation would be neutrally noted, no interruptions, no one standing behind to coach lines. I texted Maya, "Sunday, 5 p.m., I'll be there." She sent a smiley, then a drawing, a paper boat floating on blue marker water, the word Grandma on the sail. Owen sent 3 basketballs and Baforty. "Okay." I laughed. Kids somehow say exactly what's needed without many words. Then came the cleaning not of the house, but of my circle. I made one small rule. If a distant relative text starts with, "This is small," or "Aunt Estelle, I'm short for a few days," I don't reply right away. I let 24 hours pass. If it still feels like a demand rather than sharing, I don't reply at all. I call it cutting out convenient toxins. The things that wear you down aren't the punches, they're the daily pats on the shoulder asking you to give a little, then a little more. Each night, I wrote a gratitude log. 3 things, nothing grand. A cup of tea brewed just right, a cool breeze through the small window, a stranger holding the elevator door. After 10 nights, I realized the wound wasn't seeping anymore. It had skinned over not because I forgot, but because I put it in the right box. On the weekend, I opened Grant's closet. The familiar masculine scent had faded, leaving touchable memories. Wool lapels, silver cufflinks, the wine-colored silk scarf he only wore at Christmas. I kept a few things: the watch with a scuffed bezel, a crinkled jazz ticket in a coat pocket. The rest I had appraised for auction, with every dollar earmarked for the foundation. People call it giving away. To me, it was letting those things continue their journey. Sunday evening, I stood in the kitchen. No pots clattering for a family dinner like before. The kitchen was quiet, and I smiled, quiet but not lonely. Loneliness is being abandoned in a crowd. Now I stood alone and felt close to myself. The club gossip died like a flame splashed with water. Once instability was replaced by a clean bill of mental health, everyone pivoted to weather, Court 3's turf, and the upcoming ball. People are like that. If the topic no longer lets them feel right by gossiping, they move on. Marjorie said, "Let them. We live." I nodded. We live. Harold sent a long procedural summary. Locks changed, belongings sealed by the book, third-party storage receipt signed, a no trespass notice to Adrian and Tessa, plus clauses for complaint mediation arbitration tight as a net. I read it through and filed it in the top drawer, the one I only opened to remind myself that today's piece was built on clear lines. At the first Sunday call, Maya showed up first, Naomi's office in the background. She talked about an essay on a quiet hero, hesitated, then asked, "Grandma, do quiet heroes always forgive?" I thought a few seconds. No, quiet heroes set limits. Forgiveness means not letting hate burn you up. Limits mean not letting anyone burn you again. Maya nodded and smiled. Owen popped in late, held up his basketball, and bragged about free throws. "Good," I said. "If you keep discipline on the court, you'll keep it off the court." Naomi smiled in the corner and jotted notes. She was helping me build a small bridge across the age gap so the kids could cross without stepping into adult mud. Another night, a text from an unknown number. "Miss Estelle, I'm a cousin on your mother's side. I heard that you—" I looked at it and put the phone down. 24-hour rule. The next morning, I deleted it, not out of harshness, but because I've learned any tiny gap becomes a path for others' needs to seep in and erode your own. I swapped out the yellowed curtains and the too-dim bulb in the kitchen corner. I bought a few blue hydrangeas and set them in the Savannah porcelain vase Grant once brought home. I put on old jazz Ella Fitzgerald singing Bewitched, Bothered, and Bewildered, her voice like silk through the room. The kitchen was still quiet, but now it was warm, because it was mine, not someone's stage. On the weekend, Marjorie and I walked the park. The wind flipped leaves. The sky looked like a white sheet hung in the sun. She teased, "Do you think people are afraid of you now?" I said, "I hope it's respect instead. Fear fades fast. Respect, if built from clear boundaries and conditional kindness, lasts like paving stones. On the way back, I stopped at a used bookstore and bought a new leather journal. I had 4 words embossed on the cover: boundaries and gratitude. Each day I'd write 2 columns: what I said no to and what I said thank you for. 2 simple rails for the train of my heart to run straight. Night fell. I dimmed the lights, leaving a warm pool on the table. I set Grant's photo in the center, his head tipped in a sun-crinkled smile. I poured a little red wine and lifted my glass to the air. Grant, hear me? The rumor's gone. The boundaries are bright. I'm no longer the good mom who wears herself down. I'm Estelle, the woman who knows what to keep and what to release. Outside, the city hummed, but in this kitchen, the quiet wasn't a pit, it was a lake, smooth, deep, reflecting my face as it is, not warped by the need to be loved at any cost. I set the glass down, pulled out the journal, and wrote, "Today I said no to a roundabout money text. Today I said thank you for a 30-minute call with Maya's real laughter, and thank you for a quiet kitchen, quiet but not lonely." I closed the book. A chapter ended without fireworks. Just a line drawn bold and straight, one no one gets to erase with tears. I turned off the lights. In the soft dark, I heard my heart tapping a normal beat, like any heart no longer bewildered. And I knew, from here on, I'm living the rest of my life on ground that is mine. The following spring, I got a short text from Adrian. "Mom, may I see you?" Alone. No fancy restaurant, no glossy cafe like before, just a small shop in Brooklyn where I used to take him for sandwiches when he was little. I arrived on time. Adrian was already seated, no suit, no tie, no luxury car at the curb. Just a plain white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, eyes direct and tired. "I'm not here to talk about money, Mom," he began, voice hoarse like someone just out of a storm. "I just want to talk." I nodded. "Then talk." He went quiet for a few seconds, then exhaled. I've spent my whole life protecting that all-set image. I was scared of losing the house, scared of losing status, scared my friends would find out I wasn't the Grant heir anymore. But when everything collapsed, I saw I didn't really keep anything. I let Tessa lead, and I was weak. "I don't know how to be a father anymore, Mom." I looked at my son, the man who once thought he was the strongest in the family, now speaking honestly, without a shell. No excuses, no blame, just bare responsibility. I said gently, "If you want to start over, I'll listen. But you know this help isn't unconditional anymore. I have 3 conditions." He nodded. "First," I said, "you need stable work for at least 6 months, no borrowing, no asking for help. Second, both of you must attend family counseling with an independent professional, and you don't get to quit halfway. And third, you owe a public apology, not just to me, but to everyone you let those rumors hurt." Adrian lowered his head, eyes wet. "I agree. Can you trust me this time?" "I don't need to trust," I said. "I just need you to do." 2 weeks later, an email from Tessa landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple: apology. The letter was long, more than 1,000 words. Apologies line by line, explanations about pressure, fear, pride. I read it all, neither angry nor moved. I replied in 4 lines. "Tessa, thank you for writing. I don't need words, I need actions. Get real work. Stop posting borrowed images of a life, and let the kids see their parents no longer hiding behind gloss. When that happens, I'll know you're changing." 3 days later, Harold sent confirmation that tuition had been paid for a client relations and event organization course at Norwalk Community College. The payer was me, but the recipient was the school. I wasn't handing Tessa cash. I was investing in a real chance. Adrian started at a mid-sized project management firm, making about 1/10 of his old income, but enough to live on. And Tessa, once only used to high heels, learned to stand 8 hours in a conference hall, handle clients, and reset rows of chairs. I didn't interfere. I watched quietly from a distance through brief texts to Maya. Your dad's home late, learning to cook. Your mom's turning an early class in the morning. I understood. Making amends doesn't need a stage, just a small kitchen and a pot of soup simmering. In the summer, Adrian moved no more Westport Mansion, but a small rental apartment near the kids' school. I helped not with my hands, but with a nod of approval. 2 bedrooms, low ceilings, a balcony facing the train tracks but clean and bright. Tessa hung pale green curtains. Maya set a little vase of flowers. You know, I told Adrian, small homes often hold the big conversations. He smiled genuinely, for the first time. In September, I received a printed photo in a white envelope. No signature, no note, just Maya in a blue dress holding a violin on the school grounds, and Owen mid-free throw, mouth wide in a grin. On the back, someone had written in pencil, "Ordinary life can be far more beautiful." I keep the photo in a silver frame on my desk. Every morning when I make tea, I look at it, a reminder that ordinary doesn't mean less, it means right-sized. 6 months later, I called Harold. I want to set up a small scholarship in the kids' names, the Maya and Owen Grant Scholarship. Each year, it will award students with strong attendance and at least 20 hours of community service. Harold asked, "Any conditions for the children's parents?" I smiled. No, they already have their own condition, to watch their kids grow up in a healthy environment. That's a reward bigger than any check. That night, I opened my gratitude journal. First entry, I'm grateful my son learned how to apologize without excuses. Second, grateful Tessa stopped putting makeup on her fear. Third, grateful I kept my word, no return to a living stipend, only support for education and therapy. I call it helping without binding. In November, I attended Maya's school concert. I sat in the back row. Nobody noticed me. When the piece ended, she bowed and her eyes met mine for a split second. That look, it wasn't a child trapped in an adult war. It was a spirit free to love both sides without choosing. After the concert, Adrian came over, not much talk. Just, I've done the 6 months. Work steady, counseling regular, no debt. Mom, are you proud of me yet? I touched his shoulder. No need to be proud. I just feel at peace. He smiled slightly. Me too. Tessa stood a few steps away, not intruding, but her eyes no longer had the old calculating sheen. They were gentle, tired, and real. Sometimes the best thing a person can do is be tired at the right time so they finally stop. Back home, I poured a glass of wine and opened the window. Outside, the first snow of the season was falling. I thought about the path from that cold chocolate mousse on my 67th birthday to tonight, when I know love can return if it's taught to stand up straight. I remembered Dr. Kahn's line from our last visit. Some children aren't bad, they've just never been loved the right way, and sometimes loving them right means stopping the funding. I get it now. Boundaries, kept long enough, turn into a way of life, and from that way of life, respect sprouts. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Today I said no to pity. Today I said thank you for life patiently," reteaching my son. Today I learned that boundaries, when sown with love, still bloom into flowers. I closed the book and turned off the light, the glow catching the frame of Maya and Owen. I thought that maybe making amends isn't about begging forgiveness, it's about living decently long enough for someone to believe you really understand. And in that moment I smiled, knowing every final exam once passed becomes a new beginning. A year later, my kitchen smelled like orange blossom tea again. I tied on an old apron, opened the oven, and carefully slid in a tray of chocolate mousse cake. Same cake as that year, but this time, not for anyone else, for me. Warmth spilled out, mixing with the soft March wind tapping the window. Chocolate drifted through the room, sweet but not sharp, like my heart now, no longer boiling, just warm. The Estelle and Grant Foundation entered its first year of operation. The first round of scholarships went to 10 students in medicine and community education, and we opened the first clinic Grant Community Health Center in Brooklyn. I didn't cut a ribbon. I stood back in the crowd, looking at Grant's name etched in bright steel. Something in me felt both heavy and light, as if, at last, our life had paid back its finest debt to the world. I didn't expect Adrian to show up. He stood in the back, alone, no suit, no forced smile. When people thinned out, he came over, hands in his pockets, voice low but clear. "Mom, I'm sorry. No performance, no excuses." I was wrong. I looked at my son, the man who once treated apologizing like a stain, now bowing the right way. I didn't rush to hug him. I set a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, "Growing up is about paying a price, not getting revenge. You're on the right road." He nodded. In his eyes, I saw a light I'd once seen in Grant's, the light of someone who fell and stood back up. That afternoon, Tessa came too. No expensive bouquet, no heavy perfume. Just a business card. Tessa Grant, Event Coordinator, Norwalk Center. Her voice was lower, steady. "I've closed all the credit cards. I'm learning to live on a real paycheck." I looked at the woman who, to me, had been a symbol of vanity, now standing with tired honesty. I didn't say much. "Good." I nodded. Only when you stop borrowing from someone else's future can you start building your own present. She dipped her head. I saw her lip tremble, not to play a part. For the first time, I believed she was actually living, not acting. That evening, I invited the family for a small dinner. No champagne, no white tablecloth, no fussy European courses. Just pumpkin soup, crisp toast, and the chocolate mousse I'd made. Maya brought her violin and played a slow Claire de Lune, and Owen told how his team won the regional tournament. No one talked about money. No one brought up blame. We just sat together. For the first time in years, I felt I wasn't the host, and I wasn't the audience. I was simply present, whole, and calm. Late at night, after everyone left, I sat at the table and wrote one last letter to Grant. "My love, I've learned to say no, not out of anger, but to protect the part of me that hasn't broken. I understand now, when we know our limits, our love doesn't shrink, it reaches farther. Our love isn't only in the old apartment or the savings account anymore. It's being portioned into scholarships, clinics, and children. We don't know who carry the dreams you believed in." I stopped trying to be the good mom who erases herself and started being a good person, the real kind. Thank you for teaching me how to be strong without being bitter. I'm free now, a freedom with responsibility. I folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box with Grant's old watch. A closing ritual, light as a breath. On New Year's Eve, I wrote the year-end lines in my journal. Freedom doesn't come from having or not having money. Freedom comes when we can draw boundaries and still keep gratitude. Rich or poor, love or hurt, gratitude is the only currency that can hold a family together. I closed the book. Warm kitchen light washed the wall, reflecting the years gone by. I stood, turned off the stove, and opened the window. The city breathed with me, each gust like a heartbeat waking up. No demands, no fear, just the real warmth of the present. I poured a little more orange blossom tea and smiled to myself. A year ago, I thought I'd lost everything: my child, my family, my love. But it turns out only when the false things fall away do we make room for what's real. I touched Grant's photo, then looked out the window at New York, the sky turning bronze in a spring sunset. And in that light, I heard my own voice, steady and calm. "My name is Estelle Grant. I'm 68. I'm no longer afraid of being alone. Because I know people who I know how to love themselves are never truly alone. Thank you for staying with me to the end of my story. I'm curious, what city are you listening from? From a bright kitchen in New York or from some quiet corner of the world? If this story touched something in you or brought to mind someone who loved but didn't know how to hold on, leave a comment below. Every share is a way to tell each other, I understand, and you're not alone. And if you want to walk with me into the next chapters where we talk about aging, awakening, and the slow rebirths of the heart, tap like, subscribe, or simply stay here a little longer. I'm grateful you're here, because somewhere in this noisy city, we can still listen to one another with a story and a heart that's still warm.